The story begins in a clinic where a doctor informs a young lady named Lariette Blanche that she does not have a terminal illness that can cause her death. Previously, she'd been told that she only had 3 months to live, but it turns out that it was all a misdiagnosis. Lariette starts to panic because she thought she had been living her life doing whatever she wanted. She ends up meeting the greatest swordsman and warhead of the Empire, who tells her that he will find her wherever she is. Lariette's mind goes blank, and she thinks that it would have been better if the doctor had just told her she was going to die. 3 months ago. Lariette wasn't feeling well, so she went to see a doctor secretly. She explained the symptoms she had, and the doctor said it was a rare, incurable disease that only a few people have. Unfortunately, it has a mortality rate of 98%. To make it even more dramatic, he added that she's going to die in 3 months. Shocked by the diagnosis, she thought to make a list of things she wanted to do before she dies. We can say a bucket list. Lariette asked her maid, Anne, what she wanted to do before she died. Anne was surprised at first, but then replied that she couldn't imagine leaving Lariette alone to die, as Lariette couldn't even brush her hair well by herself. Lariette was moved by her words, but then Anne added that she wanted to indulge in a variety of cakes. However, the maid then suggested that Lariette go eat dinner with her family, even though Lariette didn't want to because she didn't get along with them. Her father, the Duke of Blanche, and her mother, the Duchess Blanche, were trying to sell her off to a rich old marquis because they were in a large debt. Lariette felt incredibly sad and foolish for pretending to know nothing, despite knowing everything. The parents were elated to see her brother show up, Rayan Blanche, who had magical and succession classes and monopolized all the support, while Lariette received neither support nor education, but was only tasked with assisting him with office work. Rayan asked her why she was there, and Lariette replied, "Am I not a part of this family?" She then informed him that the family's magic teacher was upset with him, and that she felt she was more capable and talented than her brother. But then, Rayan did something cruel to his sister. He intentionally spilled wine on her head and insisted that he wouldn't finish the meal unless she left. Lariette's mother told her to go back to her room and clean up. Feeling defeated, Lariette realized that she didn't want to live and die in that kind of environment, and decided that since she was going to die soon anyway, she would do whatever she wanted. She started to write her bucket list. 1. Buy Anne as many cakes as she wants. 2. Being independent, save money. 3. Call off the engagement with Marquess Segreb in proper manner. 4. Date handsome person just for 3 months. 5. Travel to the west, which Rayan always spoke about. She completed the no one on her bucket list in no time. On the way back home, suddenly, the carriage she was in got stuck in a hole. Peeking out to see if anyone could help, but Anne told her to get back in and explained that it was Duke Candle's carriage behind them, so they had to protect themselves. Lariette remembered that the Candle family was the most powerful family in the Empire, and the Duke himself was called a monster. Then a man approached and helped to release the stuck wheel of Lariette's carriage. He was holding the carriage with one hand only. Stunned by his strength, Lariette thought that all of the coachmen of the Candle family must have been as strong as him, and she silently thanked him in her mind. Back in the manor, she was planning on taking a rest, but Marquess Segreb came unexpectedly. He spoke disrespectfully to Lariette. "I don't even want to tell you here." "Ew, kinda creepy." Lariette thought of completing bucket list item number 3, which was to call off the engagement with Marquis Segreb, but she was having trouble doing it properly. The Blanche family was known for producing great wizards, and Lariette was no exception. She was born with incredible talent, but unfortunately, she never had the opportunity to learn magic properly. Her brother Rayan was always jealous of her natural abilities. However, Lariette was determined to improve her skills and secretly learned from Rayan's teacher behind their backs. The teacher realized that Rayan wasn't as talented as Lariette, so he began teaching her magic in his spare time. Wow, she made the Marquis upside down. Lariette told him that she had no intention of marrying him and therefore wanted to call off the engagement. She further added that she despised people like him who evaluated others with money. Shocked by what happened, Duke Blanche released Marquis Segreb from Lariette's magic. Marquis Segreb felt disgraced and told them that he would never forget it. The Duke tried to calm him down, but it didn't work. Lariette's father seemed furious with her, slapped her in the face, and told her that she was determined to keep the dukedom in debt. But she replied that her family had no affection for her and sold her to enjoy wealth and entertainment, and what she got was a slap. Her mother added that everything she wore and ate was because she was part of the family, and she had to take responsibility. Laureate replied that was why she had helped them out by being her mother's bookkeeper, acting as the administrator for her father's work, and also taking care of Rayan's estate. Yet her father said he would pay off the debt soon and get her married. Still in a rage, her father kicked her out and said he would remove Laureate from the family registry. Her mother tried to calm him down. Laureate was disappointed in what her family did to her, though she had never tried to go against them before. She took a bow and asked permission to leave. Rayan arrived and tried to insult her using his magic, but he had no idea how strong she was. "Let's bury him alive, girl!" She ended up leaving the house and completed 3 out of 5 on her bucket list. Now, she aimed to complete the remaining 2. Imagine she was going to meet a handsome man with a lot of dating experience, so she could date with ease. First things first, even though she had brought some money with her, she knew she needed to earn more to live an easier life. So she decided to offer her skills as a purification wizard, which she was best at. Purification magic is less efficient than healing magic, and is unpopular due to its high mana requirements. However, Laureate had no mana shortage. Unfortunately, the healing wizard had already taken all the available jobs, leaving her without any work. Feeling discouraged, she walked slowly without being aware of her surroundings, and her bag was stolen. The burglars had been stalking her since she offered her skills to the mercenaries, and overheard that she was a purification wizard. They thought she was not a threat, but little did they know that she could burn them all. Laureate chased after them, shouting for help. Hearing a young lady's cries for help, a stranger turned his head to see what was happening. Wow! It was really a god masterpiece! The man glared at the burglars, his presence itself already making them intimidated. The man smelled like a rotten corpse, and they realized that he was the monster Duke of Candle, which terrified them even more. The Duke took them down in no time, returned the bag to Laureate, who was astonished by what she saw. Duke Candle, a general who won the war that no one has ever won, was also called a warmonger for his brutal nature. As she stared at his face, Laureate noticed he was so handsome despite all the rumors. Although he smelled a bit repulsive, it was nothing compared to his beauty. She wondered if he had dated many girls with that face, but he was famous for being a cold-hearted person, so maybe he hadn't dated anyone yet. Seeing Laureate trembling, Duke Candle thought that she was afraid of him because of the curse on him, the curse that caused him to smell like a rotten corpse. Out of nowhere, Laureate pulled his sleeve, asking him if he had a girlfriend. She also asked him to date her for 3 months and told him that she liked his face. It was on her bucket list, number 4, to date a handsome guy for 3 months. Whoa, what a straightforward girl! Awkward with the situation, Laureate introduced herself and asked for his name. Surprised by her action, Duke Candle was startled and said his name was Azrahan Candle. Laureate was astonished by his nice voice and told him that his low voice was so charming. It had been 20 years since someone called him by his name, so Azrahan thought it was a prank. Laureate kept asking him to date her for 3 months. But Azrahan replied that she shouldn't joke around and asked her if she wasn't afraid of him after seeing he killed many people. He then left her and took a glance back, thinking that it was a prank. In fact, Laureate was stunned by him and thought that he was so cool, charismatic and attractive that it even made her more excited. In a bar, while thinking about how to meet Azrahan again, Laureate overheard someone talking about Duke Candle looking for a purification wizard. She approached the group and asked for more information about the rumor. They explained that Duke Candle was cursed, causing him to smell like a rotting corpse, and was in search of a purification wizard to lift the curse. However, since there were not many purification wizards around, Azrahan was struggling to find a capable one. Laureate realized that she had to go to the tiger's den to catch the tiger. A week later, Laureate found Azrahan at an information guild and apologized for her previous behavior. She suggested they start anew with an employer-employee relationship. Azrahan was surprised that Laureate wasn't afraid of him despite his reputation. Laureate introduced herself as a purification wizard and offered to break the curse that made him smell like a rotting corpse. In exchange, she asked for food and accommodation. Laureate presented a contract for Azrahan to sign. Having doubts about Laureate's offerings, Azrahan threatened her that if it was a prank, she wouldn't live long enough to see tomorrow's sunrise. Laureate was a bit intimidated, but since she could die anytime soon, she had nothing to be afraid of. She grabbed Azrahan's hand and started to purify him right away to prove that she wasn't lying. It consumed more mana than Laureate thought, as the curse was too strong and she lost all her strength. After the purification, she told Azrahan to check his hand. Azarhan thought he shouldn't have any hope that it would work since he knew what kind of curse it was. Wow! A miracle happened? Finally, someone can purify his curse. He definitely wouldn't let her go. Suddenly, Laureate stumbled and fell on Azarhan. So then the contract was signed by both parties. Upon waking up in an unfamiliar place, Laureate asked Azarhan where they were. He informed her that they were in the Candle Dukedom, as it was written in their contract that he had to provide her with food and accommodation. Laureate was ecstatic to hear that and couldn't believe that he had finally signed the contract. She grabbed Azarhan's hands, but he was confused by her actions. Laureate then asked him to call her by her nickname Ree, but Azarhan stood up and told her that he was just checking on her and had already moved her luggage there. He confirmed that she was okay and then planned to go. Laureate seemed sad that Azarhan had put up a wall and thought that she wasn't his type, but then she convinced herself that preferences can always change. Azarhan got a sudden chill from the way she stared at him, causing him to immediately move out of the room. Laureate was so happy to see Azarhan's handsome face as soon as she woke up that she accidentally said it out loud, making Azarhan, who was still standing in front of her chamber, blush all over his face. So cute! In Azarhan's workroom, Laureate was staring at him, admiring his beauty. Azarhan asked her if she had something to tell him, and she quickly answered that she had been waiting for him to finish his work and notice her. She asked him to eat together. Startled by her request, Azarhan told her that she must have a strong stomach. Confused by his statement, she asked why he talked about her stomach. Then he explained about the curse he got from the powerful witch since he was 7, that even killing the witch wouldn't break the curse. The bandage he wore had a magic spell to prevent odors. Azarhan thought Laureate would run away because she might find it disgusting. But Laureate said something unexpected. She said she would make sure to break the curse. Judging by his look, he might have been moved by what she said. As Azarhan thought about why Laureate wasn't afraid of him like everyone else who avoided him due to his unpleasant smell, he realized that if she continued to care for him with love, he would become even more greedy for her attention. That's what she wanted, dude! As Laureate purified Azarhan's other hand, he became concerned that she may have overdone it, so he stopped her. Laureate reassured him that she was only checking the condition of his hand and mentioned that there was still some purification magic on it. It appeared that the magic was effectively purifying his body. However, purification can only be performed on one body part at a time, so if one part is being purified, other parts must wait until it is complete. Laureate reassured Azarhan that she would take responsibility and he shouldn't worry about it. Azarhan then asked Laureate why she wasn't afraid of him. She replied with a mischievous smile, saying that there was no reason to be afraid of him. She added that just because he nearly lost the war, it didn't mean he didn't deserve to be praised as a national hero, and that he was the first sword of the empire. Compliments were what he deserved. She also stated that the person who should be feared was the one who cursed him, not the other way around. Azarhan was stunned by her words. Laureate touched his face and reassured him that she was not afraid of him, but rather afraid that he wouldn't date her. Feeling embarrassed, Azarhan asked Laureate to let go of him, his cheeks burning with a crimson blush. He quickly promised to meet her for dinner at 7 and then hastily made his way out of the room. Laureate was so happy to hear that and thought that Azarhan had promised her a meal just because she had touched his cheek. The head butler, Halstein, greeted Laureate and asked her if she had already met Azarhan. Before, Laureate asked Halstein where she could find Azarhan, and he kindly directed her to him. Laureate then informed Halstein that she and Azarhan were going to have dinner together. Halstein, who had been with the family for a long time, was delighted to see Azarhan have company for dinner after so long. As a gesture of goodwill, Halstein prepared a book called The Ultimate Dating Guide for Azarhan. However, Azarhan was confused by it and thought he already knew table manners from his childhood. He was afraid that Laureate would laugh at his improper manners, but he soon realized that the book Halstein had given him was a dating guide and had nothing to do with table manners. Azarhan told Halstein that the book was useless, but the butler insisted that he had never been more useful in the 27 years of serving him. Halstein then attempted to give Azarhan some advice based on the guidebook, but Azarhan ran away to avoid hearing more. As Azarhan entered the dining room, he saw Laureate waiting for him with a cheerful expression. He wondered why she was so happy just for dinner. When he sat down, Laureate took her food and moved next to Azarhan. She then told him that she wanted to revise their contract because she felt that the payment was insufficient. In the revised contract, she added an obligation for them to have at least one meal together every day and to go out twice a week. Azrahan was shocked by Lauriette's request and asked her what she meant by going out. Lauriette replied with a smile, saying that she meant going on dates. Of course! A date? Azrahan couldn't believe that was the only thing Lauriette wanted to add. He was afraid that she might run away later, thinking that he didn't pay her properly. To make sure that Lauriette would stay until all the curses were completely purified, Azrahan added one more clause to the contract stating that Lauriette had to accept any consequences if she disappeared before completing the purification process. Although Lauriette was already planning to purify all the curses, the addition to the contract made her a little bit scared. But in the end, they signed the new revised contract. Lauriette then asked Azrahan to go on a picnic with her, but he wondered why she was in such a hurry. Of course, she would do anything to win Azrahan's love. A few days later, Lauriette's mana had already fully recovered, and she couldn't wait to purify Azrahan's curse. She went to Azrahan's workroom and saw something dazzling. It was Azrahan's face. She told him that his face was like a never-setting sun. It was truly magnificent. Azrahan responded to Lauriette's request for a picnic, telling her to go in the afternoon when it was warmer. She got close to him and quickly purified his hand as the curse was not as strong as before. Azrahan still couldn't believe it had really happened. Azrahan was worried about Lauriette, since she had lost a lot of mana before. However, it turned out that he had worried for nothing. Lauriette reminded Azrahan to go on the picnic since she had already purified the curse for the day. In the garden, Lauriette was shivering and Azrahan remarked that it was still cold in the morning. Lauriette used that as an excuse to lean on him. "Hey, you little devil!" She said that she would be warm if someone gave her his coat, but Azrahan declined. Not because he was rude, but because he thought the smell of the curse would be worse if he took off the coat. Lauriette added that she actually didn't want Azrahan to catch a cold. While preparing the spot to sit, Lauriette asked Azrahan to come and sit closer to her, but he didn't give her a chance. Lauriette thought that Azrahan might have been hurt in his previous relationships, or he might not like her. She believed that being more expressive about their feelings is necessary. As for Azrahan, he felt awkward sitting in his garden, and it never crossed his mind to do that. Lauriette asked Azrahan what his favorite food was, but he said he didn't have anything in particular. She wondered how he had been living his life all this time. She then handed him a sandwich. As Azrahan ate, he wondered if Lauriette had noticed the smell of the curse or if she was holding it for him. Watching him eat seemed to fascinate Lauriette. She then attempted to use her magic to create something from the flowers. She ended up making a wreath flower crown that fell on Azrahan's head, making him look stunning. However, Azrahan asked Lauriette not to tease him. Lauriette explained that she wasn't teasing him and asked him to give the flower crown back to her. But as they tried to grab the wreath, it flew away and fell into the pond, causing both of them to fall into the water. Touching Lauriette's hair, Azrahan asked what she would do if she caught a cold. Lauriette replied that she wouldn't catch a cold since she was healthy. However, Azrahan decided to carry her back to her room. Lauriette complained that the date was too short, and it didn't count. It turned out that she had a fever, and Azrahan told her he had to go to the palace and had already called a priest to check on her. Lauriette said, "Okay." As Azrahan left the room, he thought Lauriette had become more mature and expected her to beg him to stay. However, she didn't, and this surprised him. On his way to the palace, Azrahan's carriage passed the priest's carriage, and he saw a long hair, which made him relieved as he thought the priest was a woman. In Lauriette's room, the priest asked if she was the patient. She was stunned by his appearance. He was a beautiful man, another of God's masterpieces. "Wait, he's definitely not a woman, Azrahan. You're in danger." The priest introduced himself as Doha from the Altheon Temple and then began the treatment, which may have been misunderstood since it required him to get his face close to her. While he treated her, he asked Lauriette why she stayed in that place. Lauriette replied with displeasure and asked him what was wrong with it. The priest apologized for his rude question and explained that he had a blunt personality, which led to him being bullied in the temple. He further revealed that, as a junior, he was often ignored. However, Lauriette didn't pay attention to what Doha said because she was distracted by the scar on his beautiful face. The treatment was finished, and Lauriette was already feeling better. Despite having so much mana, she couldn't treat herself. Lauriette asked Doha to come closer and she treated his scar. Amazed by what Lauriette did, Doha asked if she was a healing wizard. Laureate answered that she was a kind of them and didn't correct him that she was a purification wizard, since both types of magic worked almost the same way. Doha offered her a job as a healing wizard and promised to pay her a lot, but Laureate thought a junior priest like him wouldn't earn much. She preferred to stay by Azrahan's side, so she rejected the offer. However, Doha insisted and said that sometime later it would be okay. Laureate agreed, but only if it was later. As a token of gratitude, Doha said he would continue her treatment for free, but he would always pay her for any future treatment she gave him. Laureate made a quick decision and said yes. Since they had gotten closer, Doha asked Laureate to become friends with him. Laureate thought she had never had a friend before, so it would be great to have one before she died. "Stay away from her, Doha." Back in the temple. When Doha returned to the temple, a fellow priest greeted him and referred to him as High Priest Mikhail Doflayan. "Oh, so you were the High Priest Mikhail Doflayan. That's interesting, I didn't realize." Another priest warned Doha that he could get into trouble if someone who was on the path to becoming a pope kept wandering around. The priest then noticed that the scar on Doha's forehead was gone. Doha explained that a healing wizard in Duke Candle's place had healed him. The red-haired priest was shocked to learn that there was someone whose mana was as strong as Doha's. Doha said they needed to find out more about this healing wizard. Inside the carriage, Azrahan was struggling with a dilemma about whether to go or not. In the end, he decided against it, but even the coachman was worried that Azrahan was planning to harm someone. Despite this, Azrahan couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to go. As Azrahan entered, he was surprised to be greeted by Laureate. He tried to avoid her and asked about her cold, but Laureate reassured him that she was feeling much better and grabbed his hand, placing it on her forehead to show him. Flustered by her actions, Azrahan walked away, telling her that she didn't need to greet him like that. However, Laureate confessed that she missed him and asked if he had been thinking about her too. Azrahan denied it. She then showed him a ticket to a famous play and asked him out on a date. She had already purchased the premium seats for them, but Azrahan declined, thinking that people would avoid him and look at him with disgust. He felt that Laureate was taking his curse lightly and needed to explain his situation to her. Azrahan asked Laureate if she was afraid of him and explained that the title of Warmonger was given to him because hundreds of lives had been lost under his command. It was natural for people to be scared of him. This news may have frightened Laureate a little, but it did not mean that she would run away. Suddenly, Laureate smacked Azrahan and confronted him about his hesitation. She reminded him that she had already dared to attack the Duke of Candle, held his hand without his consent multiple times, and even called him by his name. Despite all of this, she asked if Azrahan still wanted to kill her and demanded a yes or no answer. Laureate also advised Azrahan to not pay attention to what others think and focus on what he truly wants to do. After giving him an ultimatum to provide an answer by the next morning, she walked away, warning that she would find someone else if he didn't respond. Azrahan was still in shock and unable to respond, leaving him blushing. "Yeah," with that happy smiley face, Laureate successfully asked him out. Laureate pretended to fall down, and Azrahan caught her just in time. This was exactly what Laureate had hoped for. Azrahan told her not to hold his hand secretly, but Laureate asked him to at least pretend not to notice it. However, he refused to do so. Seeing a lot of people gathered, Azrahan began to tremble, which made Laureate think that he was nervous. She then pulled his hand and reassured him that there would only be the two of them in the premium seat, so Azrahan didn't need to worry. After watching the show, Laureate was discussing with Azrahan about a player who caught her attention. But the way Azrahan imagined the man was different from what Laureate saw. Laureate excused herself to go to the bathroom and asked Azrahan to wait in the carriage. As she was walking, someone called out to Laureate from behind. It was Marquis Segreb. Laureate was ready to defend herself, but suddenly she was caught by the Marquis' men and couldn't cast any magic. However, Marquis' men holding Laureate suddenly fell apart as Azrahan appeared. Marquis Segreb was enraged, but Azrahan's glare intimidated him. Laureate stopped Azrahan from killing Marquis Segreb and took his hand and dashed through the exit door. As they sat in the carriage, Azrahan wondered if Laureate was afraid of him and considered ending their employer-employee relationship. But to his surprise, Laureate commented that he was much cooler than the main character on the show. She saw it as a form of self-defense. The next day, Laureate developed a fever again. Doha came to treat her. During the treatment, Laureate asked if there was any possibility for an incurable disease to be treated by divine power. However, Doha explained that the disease was named incurable for a reason. Laureate was devastated, thinking that she would surely die. But then Doha revealed that the disease could be cured by someone with holy power equal to that of a pope. In despair, Laureate wondered how she could ever meet a pope. Little did she know that Doha was actually the next pope. Doha used his holy power to analyze the mana in Laureate's body and discovered that it was severely twisted, which was a rare and serious condition that could lead to death if left untreated. However, he also realized that Laureate would not die from it, but instead suffer from a chronic illness. Doha offered to provide regular treatment to Laureate, and she was surprised but accepted the offer. He initiated the treatment by holding her body and placing his forehead on hers. After completing the treatment, Doha mentioned that if Laureate appreciated his help, she could assist him as well. Doha showed Laureate a wound on his arm, and when asked how he got it, he evaded the question. Doha noticed that his wound had completely healed and was impressed by Laureate's abilities. He gave Laureate a jewel as payment and explained that he owned a mine. Laureate was delighted with the easy money and asked Doha not to go to other wizards. Doha agreed, secretly determined to keep her by his side. A little bit creepy. The next day, Laureate sought out Azrahan but was told by Halstein the butler that he was still asleep after returning late the night before. Halstein offered to wake Azrahan up, and Laureate accepted, heading to his spacious bedroom. There, she woke Azrahan and told him she needed to purify his upper body, explaining that it worked better with direct skin contact. Azrahan was initially confused, but Laureate teased him and offered to remove his clothes for him, causing him to become flustered. Eventually, he removed his clothes, asking if he should also remove the bandage. Laureate confirmed that direct skin contact was necessary. As Azrahan removed his bandages, Laureate was shocked to see the curse. She began the process of purifying it, but warned Azrahan it would take time as it was a powerful curse. Azrahan blushed and became flustered by Laureate's proximity. Suddenly, Laureate collapsed from exhaustion due to her depleted mana, having treated a priest the previous day. Azrahan asked if Laureate treated the priest the same way she was treating him. Azrahan then realized he had nothing to worry about since the priest was a woman. As Laureate fainted, she asked Azrahan when they could go on another date, leaving him speechless. Later on, Laureate searched the manor for Azrahan, but he was nowhere to be found. She confided in Doha about how Azrahan seemed to be avoiding her. Laureate and Doha had grown closer and were now discussing her love life. Doha then suggested that Laureate make Azrahan jealous, but she realized she didn't have anyone else to use for this. Doha moved closer to her and reminded her that he was also a man. Don't, Doha! So he was planning to treat Laureate with that kind of gesture. She had previously considered Doha's advice to make Azrahan jealous, but now she realized it wasn't fair to deceive him. Laureate imagined how it would feel if Azrahan begged her not to leave him. She decided to go against Doha's suggestion and told him that she was going to try to charm Azrahan by herself. Late at night, Azrahan snuck inside and was met with Laureate's fierce gaze. She reminded him of the contract that stated they were to go out twice a week. Azrahan had been avoiding her because he felt strange around her. Laureate then changed her tone and said that she didn't want to disturb him since he must have been busy, and that she would go out with someone else. Azrahan was left speechless. Laureate retreated to her room and began to ponder her bucket list. She only wanted to create good memories before she died, but it seemed as though she was a burden to Azrahan. Doha prepared to meet Laureate, but his subordinate suggested taking her to the temple instead, but he knew it would be difficult to persuade her. Doha realized Laureate was a skilled healing wizard and began to scheme ways to win her over. As he contemplated how to seduce her, Laureate unexpectedly appeared in his carriage and invited him to accompany her on an outing, declaring that the plan to make Azrahan jealous had begun. After indulging in numerous desserts, they strolled around. Laureate was intrigued by Doha's situation despite his considerable wealth. As she believed he owned a mine, he still worked as a healer. Doha explained that he wasn't accustomed to going out much, but sometimes he had to take the job when a senior ordered a junior to do so. Laureate was touched by his sense of duty. She then promised to avenge him by burning their clothes or hanging them on a tree. Laureate was looking at a brooch that might be perfect for Azrahan when Doha surprised her. She suggested to Doha the accessories that might suit him as well, and told him that she was going to ask the price. While waiting for Laureate, a senior priest approached Doha, demanding an apology and belittling him. Though tempted to teach the priest a lesson, Doha decided against it to avoid revealing his identity to Laureate and the crowd. Instead, he apologized, but then fire suddenly appeared on the priest's clothes. Laureate pulled Doha away. As she had told him before, she promised to punish those who wronged him. Doha found Laureate's determination amusing, and even more intriguing, which only fueled his desire for her. Meanwhile, at Candle's Manor, Azrahan seethed with anger. Learning that the person accompanying Laureate was the male priest, Azrahan considered it none of his concern if they were involved romantically, since all he needed was Laureate's assistance in breaking his curse. He believed that no one could possibly love a monster like himself, and that Laureate was likely only taking pity on him. After some time had passed, Azrahan invited Laureate to share a meal with him. He expressed that it had been a long time, but Laureate's response was cold. Laureate had followed Doha's advice and was pleased to see that her plan to make Azrahan jealous was working. Seeing Azrahan's handsome face left Laureate breathless. Azrahan surprised her by asking how she had been, and she responded that she was doing well. Laureate mentioned that Doha would be arriving in the afternoon and reassured Azrahan that he had nothing to worry about. Azrahan initially questioned if there was anything to be worried about, but then Laureate asked if he was jealous. Azrahan told Laureate that he wasn't bothered by her spending time with Doha, as long as it didn't interfere with the purification process. Disappointed, Laureate lost her appetite and asked to leave. When Doha arrived, she informed him that the plan to make Azrahan jealous had failed. Doha had already anticipated this. He used this opportunity to console Laureate and win her affection. Not a chance. As Laureate noticed Doha's glasses, which made him look like a librarian, she complimented him on how well they suited him. Doha simply replied that he felt like wearing them that day. Okay, time for the explanation. Delphalion was using his foresight, a skill possessed only by the strongest and most superior of believers. It was even a crucial factor in the selection of the Pope. However, Doha used this ability for personal reasons to predict his luck for the day. He didn't even care if the superiors criticized him for it. Doha drew Laureate nearer and inquired if he could start the treatment. Just wait for it. In Azrahan's workroom, Halstein confronted Azrahan about how his actions were hurting Laureate. Halstein understood that Azrahan may struggle to recognize his emotions since he has been isolated for so long. Despite Halstein's advice to follow his heart, Azrahan denied any attachment to anyone due to his curse. But Azrahan's curiosity led him to peek into Laureate's room, where he found Doha with her. Azrahan became furious and demanded Doha leave, but Laureate explained that they were just friends who helped each other. Azrahan realized his jealousy and admitted to himself that he had feelings for Laureate. When Laureate asked if she could go for a drink with Doha, Azrahan asked her not to go. Azrahan confessed to Laureate that he had strong feelings for her, and that he couldn't stop thinking about her even when they were apart. Finally, my sweet little kitten. He admitted to feeling jealous when he saw her with other man and confessed that he wanted her for himself. Azrahan was confused by his unfamiliar feelings and didn't know how to handle them. He reminded Laureate of the proposal to date, and she was thrilled to accept it and hugged him. Azrahan was amazed to feel such strong affection for the first time in his life. As Laureate thought she would enjoy the moment for 3 months and then leave with no regrets, Azrahan thought he wanted to renovate the garden because he hoped Laureate would stay with him forever. Laureate and Azrahan discussed their couple's to-do list. Azrahan almost saw Laureate's bucket list, but she stopped him just in time. Phew! As they went through the list, Azrahan became jealous when he saw that Laureate had already had fun with Doha in the city. Laureate found Azrahan's jealousy cute and expressed her desire to do all the items on the list with him. Azrahan then prepared a carriage and took Laureate to the best boutique in the empire, promising to buy her every dress and accessory she liked. They ended up buying everything, and Laureate playfully poked fun at Azrahan for not answering when she asked if she looked pretty in a dress. Azrahan eventually told her she was pretty. Got carried away, Laureate demanded a kiss from him. Just as their lips were about to meet, the coachman interrupted by asking if he should move the luggage. Azrahan got flustered and ran away, leaving Lariat confused. After a few days, there had been no progress in their relationship since Azrahan ran away when they tried to kiss. Azrahan had improved his gestures of attention by doing small things like pulling out chairs, but Lariat didn't have much time left and couldn't waste any more time. So, she seduced Azrahan by asking him to feed her. As he fed her, she moved closer and embraced him, telling him that he was the best. Azrahan's heart was racing, but suddenly he stood up and said he had some documents to take care of, and he left despite Lariat's protests. She wondered if Azrahan only wanted a platonic love relationship with her. Platonic love is a deep and emotional connection between two people that doesn't involve any romantic feelings or physical attraction. Azrahan seemed unapproachable, but Lariat was determined to make progress in their relationship. Lariat visited Azrahan a few days later for a purification ritual, but she had a secret plan in mind. She wanted to test Azrahan's aversion to physical touch and hoped to work on making him more comfortable with it. Azrahan was ready to be purified and Lariat began the process. However, Azrahan's impure thoughts made the process difficult for him. Suddenly, Lariat became dizzy and asked Azrahan for a hug, but he told her to keep her distance because he was losing his patience. Lariat encouraged him to act on his desires, which shocked Azrahan. He pushed Lariat onto the couch and asked if he could do anything he wanted. Actually, Lariat only wanted a kiss, but it seemed like Azrahan wanted to devour her. As Azrahan made his move, Lariat hesitated and apologized. Azrahan warned her not to do it again because he might not be able to stop himself next time. Lariat promised to remember his words. A few days after the purification, Lariat invited Azrahan to a date at a bar, but he declined due to his concern about his curse. Azrahan felt sorry for Lariat for having to date a monster like him, but he couldn't bear the thought of letting her go. Lariat reassured him that they could go on a date anywhere, as long as they were together, which made Azrahan happy. Azrahan had to attend a meeting at the palace, and Lariat reminded him that he might be late if he didn't leave soon. Azrahan promised her that he would be back as soon as possible. He had planned to finish his work quickly and have a dinner and a drink and a nice talk with Lariat, but the meeting seemed to drag on with no end in sight. Azrahan grew annoyed and asked the emperor when they were going to end the useless argument. The other participants fell silent, but then Duke Blanche, Lariat's father, scolded him for his rudeness. Azrahan thought of warning Duke Blanche, but he let it go because Duke Blanche was his lover's father. To avoid any commotion, the emperor decided to call it a day since they couldn't come to a conclusion. Azrahan quickly left the meeting room. So, someone was being impatient to have a date with his lover. As Azrahan hurriedly left the meeting, Duke Blanche grumbled to himself. The Duke sitting next to him advised him that he was fortunate Azrahan didn't do something bad to him. However, Duke Blanche insisted that Azrahan was the one being arrogant towards the elders. His companion warned him that if he wanted to save his failing family, he should behave more wisely. This made Duke Blanche feel upset, and he began to blame Lariat for everything that had happened since she left the Blanche household. He even thought that if Lariat were to return and beg to live there again, he would show her mercy. Duh, really, dude? I think you're the one who should beg for her mercy. As soon as Lariat heard that Azrahan had arrived home, she hurried to the front door, but he wasn't there. Halstein informed her that Azrahan was changing his clothes. She was relieved that Azrahan didn't see her running because it wouldn't have looked elegant. However, Azrahan was already behind her and told her that she shouldn't have run just to meet him. The way Azrahan treated her made Lariat think that he must have a lot of dating experience. Azrahan wondered what was on Lariat's mind. Halstein kicked off the show with his bartending skills, leaving Lariat amazed by his talent. He also mentioned that, being the head butler, he needed to have the skill. Rushing out, Halstein told them to have a memorable night. Lariat and Azrahan toasted each other before taking a sip. Azrahan was surprised at how quickly Lariat downed her drink, but she explained that she had a high tolerance. They chatted and enjoyed each other's company. Lariat then brought up Doha, clarifying that he was only a friend and had even helped their relationship. She asked Azrahan to let Doha continue treating her since he was the best at it. Azrahan was displeased at Lariat getting close to another man, but agreed for her health's sake. Lariat was grateful. Suddenly feeling hot, she asked Azrahan to help remove her clothes. Azrahan asked Lauriette if she was drunk, but suddenly she pushed him down onto the couch and suggested they continue where they had left off. "Whoa, not too fast, honey." Azrahan was cautious, concerned that Lauriette was drunk, but her tender caresses ignited a fire within him. Azrahan told Lauriette to get away from him, but she countered with a request. Lauriette asked Azrahan to kiss her. Azrahan touched her cheek, thinking that a kiss was all she wanted, and told Lauriette to keep her promise. Lauriette closed her eyes, but instead of a kiss on the lips, Azrahan planted a kiss on her cheek. Azrahan asked if that satisfied her. Disappointed, Lauriette grabbed Azrahan's face and kissed him on the lips. Finally satisfied, Lauriette told Azrahan that's what she meant by a kiss. Flustered, Azrahan told her it was enough and pinned her on the couch. He told her not to go too far. Suddenly, Lauriette's eyes slowly closed and she fell asleep. Azrahan was left bewildered, sitting by her side in silence. The next morning, Lauriette entered Azrahan's workroom to find him looking exhausted. He told her that she had finally woken up. Lauriette pretended not to remember anything from the previous night, except for when Azrahan agreed to let Doha continue treating her. As Azrahan thought that Lauriette had taken his first kiss but didn't remember it, he forbade her from drinking alcohol with others. Lauriette argued that when she drank with others, she never did anything bad. Azrahan appeared jealous upon hearing this, thinking that she might have been drinking with her ex-boyfriend. Meanwhile, Lauriette felt that Azrahan was being unfair, assuming that he may have also drunk with many of his ex-girlfriends. "All you guys need is good communication." Halstein announced Doha's arrival, and Azrahan instructed him to show Doha to the living room. Doha was waiting, and Lauriette quickly apologized for what happened before. Doha reassured her that there was no need to apologize, but if she still felt that way, Doha told her that she could visit him next time instead. Lauriette requested that Doha alter the healing technique, as she had a boyfriend and preferred to minimize physical contact with others. Despite feeling annoyed, Doha agreed. However, Doha expressed discomfort being watched by the servants. Doha suggested they go to the library that day, and Lauriette assumed Azrahan would be busy, so it would be fine. Doha believed that Azrahan could only monitor them through his servants and wouldn't join them because he values his honor. However, Azrahan surprised them by saying he would come along, leaving Doha stunned. "Great! That's how you should act, Azrahan." As Azrahan expressed his desire to join Doha and Lauriette on their trip to the library, tension filled the air. Doha tried to greet Azrahan but was met with silence. When Lauriette asked if Azrahan had been busy with work, he insisted that being with her was his top priority. Oh my! Now he's really good at it! It was awkward inside the carriage, but Lauriette hoped that her friend and lover could find common ground. Suddenly, Doha had a sense of foreboding that something bad might happen if he accompanied them. When he learned that they were headed to the Imperial Library, Doha panicked, knowing that being recognized by members of the royal family could spell trouble. He quickly made up an excuse about needing to attend to an important matter at the temple and begged off. Once Doha left, Lauriette and Azrahan were left alone in the carriage. Lauriette took Azrahan's hand, causing his heart to race. Though he struggled to control himself, Azrahan reminded himself that he was human and not a monster. In the library, Azrahan trailed Lauriette closely, which made her think he was adorable. She whispered to Azrahan and asked him to pick a book, which made him flustered by the way she did it. Lauriette playfully reminded him that they were in a library and needed to be quiet. She then went off to find a book, and couldn't help but imagine the romantic library scenes like in novels. Lauriette tried to reach a book on a high shelf, hoping Azrahan would come to her aid. However, a stranger approached her and offered to help. She declined his offer fiercely and tried once more. But this time Azrahan came to her rescue. Lauriette asked him if he had witnessed what happened earlier. Azrahan teased her by asking which part she meant, the way she reached for the book or the way she shooed away the stranger. He admitted to liking her fierce attitude and told her to treat all men like that. Lauriette expressed her fear that Azrahan might be scared away by her fierceness. Azrahan reassured her that it wouldn't happen. In fact, if Lauriette ran away, he would find her wherever she went. As they were leaving the library, they discussed getting cake when someone called out to Laureate from behind. It was her wicked brother, Rayan. Concerned that Rayan might mistreat her in front of Azrahan, she asked him to go ahead without her, as she needed to have a lengthy chat with her brother. Rayan belittled Laureate, accusing her of clinging to Azrahan after leaving the Blanche household, which he deemed a disgrace to the family. Laureate retorted that Rayan was also bringing shame upon the family. Rayan then told her to return home since she was incapable of doing anything else, but Laureate didn't care and told him to handle family affairs himself. Rayan's anger surged, causing him to strike Laureate in the face in front of others. While thinking what to do with him that wouldn't cause much problem to her, Laureate stood up. She declared that she would end the family lineage and kicked him in the groin. Ouch! Then Laureate went to a healer to get treatment for her bruise. However, since the healer was low-ranked, the treatment was not perfect. Laureate avoided Azrahan, not wanting him to see her in that state, and decided to stroll around. Suddenly, someone tapped her shoulder. It was Madame Sharb, the owner of a boutique. She asked Laureate what she was doing out alone at that hour. Laureate hesitated to answer, but Madame Sharb invited her to the boutique and gave her a gift of new accessories. She suggested that Laureate change her hairstyle to make it look better. Madame Sharb shared with Laureate that many people came to her boutique after a long, tiring day, and she hoped that Laureate could end the day without worrying about anything, and that the next day would be great. Laureate was surprised to learn that Madame Sharb knew who she was, despite never having met her before. Here's some explanation. Madame Sharb had been close to the princess, who had broken off the engagement with Rayan, causing tension between the princess and the Blanche family. This tension prevented Laureate from getting close to the princess and Madame Sharb. However, Laureate expressed that she was no longer a part of the Blanche household and asked Madame Sharb to call her by her first name, Laureate. She was grateful that leaving the Blanche household had led to a new friendship. Back at the Candle Manor, Halstein excitedly announced Laureate's return to everyone in the house, who had been worried about her. Azrahan rushed to check on her, and Laureate apologized for being late, explaining that she had a long chat with Rayan and went to a boutique. However, Azrahan noticed a bruise on Laureate's face and angrily demanded to know who had caused it. Laureate hesitated to reveal the truth, but Azrahan recognized the wound as being from a bare-fisted hit and just had a treatment with a low-ranked healer. Laureate, concerned about Azrahan's potential reaction to the perpetrator, decided to handle the situation herself to avoid wasting any more of their limited time together. Azrahan understood her decision and offered to call a priest to treat her injury properly. In his room, Azrahan made a discreet call to Gerard, the leader of the Shadow Unit, to investigate what had happened to Laureate and the Blanche family. The Altheon Temple was holding its most important meeting of the year, with only the Pope and senior priests in attendance. Doha found the meeting boring, but when a subordinate asked to speak with him, the deputy head became displeased and reminded him that he needed to teach his subordinate proper behavior. Doha used sarcasm to reply, pointing out that even the deputy head was telling him what to do. Despite this, Doha allowed his subordinate to enter and inform him that the Candle House was seeking his assistance in healing Laureate. Doha promptly left the meeting, causing some displeasure among the other priests. When Doha arrived at the Candle House, Laureate greeted him and he noticed the bruise on her face. Doha became angry and demanded to know who was responsible. Laureate was confused about why Doha was angry. While treating her, Doha asked if the bruise was caused by Azrahan, but Laureate denied it. Doha was sure it wasn't Azrahan, because if it was, Laureate would not have survived. He continued to examine her face and wondered who could have done such a thing. Laureate was under the protection of the next pope and the Warmonger, so who would dare harm her? Laureate invited Doha to have a seat. Doha realized that if anything were to happen to Laureate, it would be problematic since she was also the one capable of healing him. He then asked Laureate to lend him her wrist and gave her a sacred bracelet with divine power that could heal her. Laureate was surprised by such a valuable gift, and she thanked him for it. She also apologized for not having anything to offer him, but Doha reassured her that her company was enough. In reality, the bracelet had another purpose. It was designed to monitor Laureate's health and would alert Doha if she was in danger. Meanwhile, Azrahan was reading a dating guidebook when he came across a passage stating that adjusting the pace of physical intimacy was essential. It warned that going too fast could lead to boredom. This idea shocked Azrahan and made him worry that Laureate might become bored with him and want to end their relationship. He became lost in his thoughts, fearing that he would be left by Laureate. The next purification process was carried out in the workroom, as suggested by Laureate, to avoid the story being rated for 18+ if it was done in his bed. Although Laureate was fine with physical intimacy, she wasn't emotionally ready to take things further yet. During the process, Azrahan tried to control his thoughts. As the purification was finished, he thought that he shouldn't be too greedy and risk making Laureate bored with him. Suddenly, Laureate showed him a to-do list and asked if they could cook together. Azrahan pushed her face away because it was too close. But then Laureate kissed his hand, leaving him flustered. The kitchen had already been prepared by Halstein, who also reminded Azrahan about marriage. Laureate asked Azrahan to wear the apron, but he was too shy and declined, saying the size didn't fit him. But Laureate thought it would be cute on him. Azrahan had something on his mind and was thinking about how they should take things slow before Laureate got bored of him, which scared him the most. He spoke up and asked Laureate to take it slow for a bit, and she instantly agreed. But what Laureate was really thinking about was taking it slow in cooking, while Azrahan was focused on physical intimacy. They started cooking together and had fun, even laughing together when Laureate did something silly. As the food was finished, Laureate fed Azrahan and teased him to wipe off the chocolate left on his lips. Laureate playfully licked the chocolate off Azrahan's face, but then had a thought. She realized that their first kiss had happened when she was drunk and wasn't very romantic. So, she decided to create a more romantic moment and left some chocolate on her lips, asking Azrahan to clean it off. However, Azrahan was hesitant and told her it was too much. He had expressed his worry that she might get bored with him. He felt like Laureate wasn't taking his concerns seriously, even felt a bit pathetic for worrying so much. Azrahan then stood up, wiped her lips with a handkerchief, and hurried out of the kitchen, leaving Laureate confused. Again? The next morning, Laureate was determined to have a proper conversation with Azrahan without pushing him away. Azrahan greeted her by calling her wizard instead of her name, which confused her. Laureate found it amusing and teasingly asked if he was mad at her. Azrahan struggled to tell her the truth, fearing that Laureate would be disappointed and leave him. He realized that he should be grateful for Laureate's love and loyalty, but he couldn't keep his feelings to himself any longer. Azrahan explained that Laureate didn't seem to take his request seriously. Perplexed, Laureate asked which request he was referring to. Azrahan mentioned the request he made yesterday to take things slow in their relationship. Laureate was taken aback. She told him that she had thought his request was to take things slow in the kitchen, not in their relationship. Azrahan was embarrassed and tried to run away, but Laureate stopped him. Azrahan asked her to let him go, but she refused. Then Azrahan pretended that his hand was hurt, causing Laureate to release his hand. However, he quickly ran away, feeling embarrassed about the misunderstanding. Laureate couldn't resist teasing Azrahan after discovering he had run away due to embarrassment. As she dropped him off at the gate, she playfully reminded him not to bolt again if he ever felt embarrassed at work. As they walked, Gerard asked Azrahan if he had informed Laureate about their destination. Azrahan replied that he had not felt the need to do so. However, he felt that he should not keep anything from Laureate, so he decided against lying and didn't provide any additional information since Laureate already knew he went to the palace. They opened the door to check on Rayon, who had been locked up inside by them. Azrahan's sharp eyes met Rayon's, who immediately cursed and began shouting. However, Azrahan was quick to silence him with a punch, reminding him of his place. Azrahan was furious upon learning that Rayon had hit Laureate, a girl he himself was hesitant to even touch. After wiping his hand, he made it clear that he had no intention of killing Rayon. Azrahan spared Rayon only because of Laureate, and he wanted him to remember that. In the Candle residence, Laureate and Azrahan were having dinner together, when Laureate suddenly remembered the fact that they hadn't made much progress in their relationship. But time was running out as their dating contract was only for 3 months, and she only had 10 weeks left. She asked Azrahan how slowly they should take things, but he responded that they should take things as slowly as possible. Lauriette, feeling frustrated with the slow pace, blurted out that she wanted to take things to the next level with Azarhan soon. This caused the servants to drop a plate in shock. Halstein and the other servants quickly exited the room, realizing the importance of the succession of the duchy. Azarhan nervously asked Lauriette what she wanted to do with him. Lauriette responded with enthusiasm that she wanted to experience everything with him, but before she could elaborate, Azarhan quickly stuffed a piece of bread into Lauriette's mouth to prevent her from talking further as he was already embarrassed. Azarhan then went on to explain that his cursed body made him feel like a monster, and that he found it difficult to be intimate with her. He worried that Lauriette would run away after seeing all of that. But Lauriette saw it as a motivation to work harder on purifying Azarhan, so he wouldn't have to worry about touching her. When Azarhan heard those words, he felt something indescribable in his heart, like it was about to burst. He wondered if it was love that he was feeling. Lauriette laid on her bed while pondering about the curse that she had to purify because she was the only one who could cure Azarhan. She wondered who had cursed him. It must have been a powerful wizard with a strong hatred towards him. Lauriette reflected on the challenges Azarhan must be facing due to the curse, particularly in their relationship. As she recalled his bashful expressions, she began to worry if she was his first love. This concern troubled Lauriette as she had no intention of starting a committed relationship, given her limited time of 3 months. Lauriette was determined to ask Halstein about Azarhan the next day. However, while she was trying to sneak up on him, Halstein caught her and asked her what she wanted to know. Lauriette informed him that she had a question regarding Azarhan. That made Halstein ecstatic, and he inquired whether Lauriette was interested in learning about Azarhan's wealth, power, or the joys of being a duchess. Lauriette quickly clarified by asking if Azarhan had been in a relationship before. Halstein realized that he needed to provide a thoughtful answer, considering the importance of the matter. However, he responded by admitting that he had no information regarding Azarhan's romantic history. Noticing it was a stupid question, Lauriette then asked permission to leave. While walking back to her chamber, Lauriette unexpectedly spotted Azarhan in the hallway and rushed towards him. He immediately caught her and warned her about the dangers of running in the hallway. Lauriette then requested a hug from him, but Azarhan refused due to the possibility of being seen by others. Lauriette then took Azarhan's hand and they entered a nearby room, but it was so narrow that they could hardly keep a distance between them. Lauriette then asked if they could hug there, to which Azarhan slowly moved in for the embrace. But suddenly, Lauriette felt something hard down there. Was he wearing a sword? No, he wasn't. Upon realizing that something strange was happening to him, Azarhan abruptly pulled away from Lauriette and asked if the hug had been enough. Lauriette cheerfully replied that although it was short, she was satisfied. Meanwhile, Azarhan was worried that his sudden reaction might have been noticed by her. Absolutely. Now Lauriette was convinced there was nothing wrong with Azarhan's lower body. He was definitely a vigorous young man. Let's put down the tent. Azarhan tried to change the topic, sensing that the tension should be eased. He asked Lauriette about the bracelet she had been wearing lately. Lauriette revealed that the bracelet was a gift from Doha, but then she quickly realized her mistake as Azarhan might not approve of it. Indeed, now that the atmosphere had shifted, he realized he should get rid of Doha sooner. But then he recalled that the dating guidebook highlights the significance of avoiding jealousy to prevent the lover from getting weary. Lauriette was perplexed by Azarhan's expression and assumed that he might have been upset. She explained to him that the bracelet was a gift with divine magic to assist in her recovery. Although Azarhan said he understood, his expression showed otherwise. Still wearing the same expression, Azarhan reassured Lauriette that it was okay to exchange gifts between friends. He also suggested that she could spend time with her friend while he was occupied. Lauriette was thrilled to hear this and exclaimed that Azarhan was the best. The next day, Azarhan informed Lauriette that he had an urgent matter to attend to in the palace, and he needed to leave immediately. As Lauriette bid farewell, Azarhan appeared reluctant to leave. Sensing this, Lauriette asked if he needed to use the restroom. Azarhan averted his gaze and admitted there was something else. He then surprised Lauriette by placing a beautiful accessory in her hair, explaining that it was a gift and it looked lovely on her. It was clear that Azarhan was jealous of the bracelet, but his actions were endearing nonetheless. Suddenly the coachman shouted, reminding Azrahan that he needed to leave for the palace. This surprised and embarrassed both him and Lariat. As Azrahan walked towards the door, he turned back and gave Lariat a hug before quickly leaving with a red face. Doha arrived and immediately noticed the new accessory Lariat was wearing, complimenting her on how pretty it looked. As they began the treatment, Lariat extended an invitation for Doha to join her outside afterwards. Despite Doha's concern for Azrahan, Lariat assured him that it was not a problem, as Azrahan had a lot of trust in her. However, Doha was visibly annoyed upon learning this. It looked like they were having fun. While they were walking around the town, Lariat offered to treat Doha for the day and asked him what he would like to buy. Doha requested the bracelet from their previous outing. Lariat hesitated as the bracelet was inexpensive, but Doha insisted that it was perfect for him and that she had picked out the best one. She ended up buying the bracelet for Doha. Lariat observed that Doha was struggling to fasten the bracelet, and she kindly offered to assist him. It was then that Doha became aware that Lariat had brought along another item, and he inquired about its nature. Lariat revealed that it was a gift for Azrahan. "Oh my Doha, you shouldn't be jealous for someone else's lover. Get a grip." Doha told Lariat that he had heard a rumor that Duke Candle had cut off the arm of Marquis Segreb at the theater because Marquis Segreb had harmed the Duke's partner. Doha asked if the partner was Lariat, and she confirmed it. She was worried that if her parents found out about the rumor, they would take her back by force from Azrahan, and the thought made her look pale. But seeing this, Doha asked if she was okay and told her not to worry. He assured her that she could trust him because she had the most reliable priest at her side and promised to always protect her. But suddenly, the wall near them cracked and fell apart. Lariat quickly cast a defense spell thinking she was a goner. But she wasn't about to let Doha meet the same fate. With swift movements, she layered on as much magic as she could to shield him. Doha was in disbelief as he watched Lariat sacrifice herself to protect him. As she accepted her fate, Azrahan's image crossed her mind. In a panic, Doha shielded Lariat's body from the rubble. "This is my boy!" A crowd had formed to see what was happening. "I guess we spot the suspect here." Lariat slowly opened her eyes, surprised to be alive, and saw that Doha had protected her. He looked really mad and yelled, "Are you crazy?" But Lariat just smiled, relieved that he was okay. Doha was worried sick about her, but Lariat insisted he stay put. She told him not to move and kept reassuring him that everything was going to be okay as she continued to cast her magic to keep the rubble from crushing them. Doha was getting frustrated, so he decided to use his magic to free them from the rubble. He finally showed off his impressive powers and they were both saved. Doha asked Lariat why she did something so foolish. Lariat didn't get what Doha was mad about, so he asked her again why she only cast the spell on him. Lariat wondered why Doha was angry because it was a quick decision and there wasn't much time to think. What mattered was that Doha was safe. Lariat replied to Doha that she did it because he was her friend. Doha was even more surprised when he found out this truth. They had only met a few times, and yet Lariat had risked her life for him. Doha wasn't a believer in selflessness or kindness. He thought that everyone acted for their own interests. But when he saw what Lariat had done for him, he was left in disbelief. She wouldn't gain anything by protecting him, even if it meant putting her own life on the line. Lariat suddenly perked up and felt relieved that they both made it out without any injuries. As they stood up, Doha asked her if she was hurt, but Lariat assured him that she was fine. Doha felt annoyed because even though Lariat was wounded, she acted like it was no big deal. He then healed her injuries and scolded her, saying she almost died. But Lariat responded that everyone dies eventually and thanked him for healing her. However, Doha didn't seem pleased with Lariat's response. He told her that she couldn't die because he wouldn't allow it. "Wait, are you God?" Even though Lariat was fixated on Azrahan, Doha was determined to keep her safe. He advised her not to take any reckless risks that could hurt her. Lariat couldn't help but think that Doha was still processing what had happened earlier. Doha looked at the ruined building and started to wonder what went wrong, since it didn't seem like it would just collapse like that. Lariat was surprised to see Doha so angry. She had never seen him like that before. But she was relieved that he was safe. Later on, Laureate finally made it back home to Candle's Manor, feeling completely drained after everything that had happened. Azrahan was already there and greeted her, asking where she had been. Laureate was thrilled to see him and quickly asked for a hug. Azrahan hugged her back, but then noticed something on her and his expression changed. He asked if she had been in an accident. Azrahan told her that he smelled some dirt on her. Laureate was confused as to how he could smell it. She didn't want to worry Azrahan more, so she told him she fell down on the street. Azrahan asked if she was hurt and Laureate said she only had a few scratches, but Doe had healed her. Azrahan checked to make sure she was okay. Then Azrahan asked if Laureate had fun, and she said yes, but she enjoyed being with Azrahan the most. Laureate thought Azrahan was cute and was determined to purify his curse quickly to make him happy. When the building almost crushed her, Laureate realized that if she died before breaking the curse, Azrahan would always be faced with nothing but misery. She wouldn't let that happen and was willing to pay any price to break the curse. The next day, Laureate was sitting on Azrahan's lap, ready to do the treatment as she insisted. But Azrahan was worried because she didn't look so good. Laureate told him she was fine, but in reality, she wasn't. She used up all her mana to save Doha before, but she kept telling herself she had to purify Azrahan as soon as possible. The moment Azrahan saw that Laureate wasn't feeling well, he grabbed her hand to stop her. All of a sudden, Laureate lost her balance and fell right into Azrahan's body. She told him she was feeling cold. Azrahan panicked and tried to warm her up with a hug. But then Laureate said she needed a warm bath, and Azrahan quickly scooped her up and was about to ask the maid to draw the water. However, Laureate pulled him closer and asked him to stay with her while she bathed since she didn't trust the maid. Azrahan blushed hard and had no clue what Laureate meant. But then she explained that she just needed a friend to keep her company and that she would stay clothed while bathing. As Azrahan understood that Laureate was trying her best to help him despite her own condition, he decided not to bail out because he felt too shy. Azrahan asked Laureate if the water was warm enough. Laureate replied that the temperature was fine, but she got upset because Azrahan was sitting with his back to her. Azrahan explained that he needed to do it for his own sake. Laureate got frustrated and suddenly grabbed Azrahan's arm, warning him that if he ran away again, she would do the same. She put on a stern face, which made Azrahan turn his back to her and ask if she was serious, shocking Laureate. But Laureate quickly changed the mood by saying that she meant running around the mansion like playing tag. Azrahan apologized for misunderstanding her, and told her that he thought about tying her up if it was serious. Laureate assumed that Azrahan was kidding. "You were joking, weren't you?" Azrahan smiled upon hearing that. Seeing his smile, Laureate playfully asked him to wash her, which caught Azrahan off guard. Azrahan's face turned pale as he thought about washing Laureate's body. "Hey, you dirty mind!" But then Laureate clarified that she only wanted him to wash her hair. Azrahan felt relieved and began to wash her hair gently, being careful not to cause any harm. Suddenly, he noticed a scar on Laureate's neck and asked her about it. Laureate told him that when she was young, Rayan pushed her down the stairs and lied to their parents about what had happened. Her parents scolded her because they thought she was trying to challenge Rayan for succession. Azrahan felt upset after hearing the story and wished he had at least smashed one of Rayan's hands back then. Laureate continued her story, telling Azrahan that she was locked in a room as punishment and was forced to endure it. Her mother said it was to help her develop patience, so all she could do was wait. Laureate switched gears and asked Azrahan if he had any issues with her hair color, since someone apparently complained that it hurt their eyes to look at her pink lock. Azrahan asked her who said such nonsense, as he would love to give them a piece of his mind. But Laureate insisted he answer her question, and he told her he couldn't not like it. Laureate was happy to hear that, and Azrahan was stunned by her smile. She then teased him, asking if he thought only her hair was pretty. Azrahan blushed and said that everything about her was beautiful. Laureate drew closer to him and asked him to kiss the places he found most beautiful. He kissed her hair and told her that there was no place on her that wasn't lovely. Then he kissed her hand and asked if he should kiss her everywhere. Laureate playfully teased him, telling him to start with the most lovely place. Azrahan leaned in and kissed her lips. A few days later, they were bickering outside the boutique, with Laureate teasing Azrahan to help her try on clothes, but he declined, suggesting that Madame Charb could assist her instead. Laureate playfully hit him, calling him mean, but it was more like a massage for Azrahan. Suddenly, Gerard emerged from behind the building and signaled to Azrahan. Seeing this, Azrahan asked Laureate to go inside first and said he would be back with her shortly. As soon as Laureate walked into the boutique, she saw Madame Charb looking all puzzled and glancing at someone behind her. And then, bam! Laureate was completely shocked to find her own mother standing there. Shocked by the situation, Laureate was taken aback and tried to keep her cool as she greeted her mother with a long time no see. Her mother rushed up to her, grabbing her shoulder and expressing concern for Laureate. With a worried look on her face, she asked where Laureate had been all this time, emphasizing how worried she was. But Laureate had reached her limit with her mother's theatrics. She quickly brushed off her mother's hand and questioned her mother's concern, asking how someone who claimed to worry about her could show no signs of sadness and still indulge in fancy things like shopping at a high-end boutique. Her mother came up with an excuse, saying it was because she was a duchess and it was her obligation to do all those things. Feeling like her mother was spewing a bunch of bullshit, Laureate bluntly stated that she had never seen the Blanche family make any effort to advertise missing people in the newspaper or anywhere else. This time, her mother played the victim card, claiming she couldn't do anything about it because of her father's authority. Laureate pondered her mother's words, but that didn't mean she was easily convinced. If her mother genuinely cared about her, she believed there had to be something more she could do to find her. Laureate accused her mother of making up excuses when she was actually capable of doing better. The anger inside her began to boil, even though her mother kept apologizing. Laureate couldn't see any sincerity in those apologies, viewing her mother as just as terrible as the rest of her family. Laureate struggled to contain her emotions as they were on the verge of exploding. Unable to hold it in any longer, she bolted for the exit door while her mother desperately tried to stop her. Laureate kept running aimlessly, with the only thought in her mind being to escape that hellish situation. Her mind went blank as she ran, gasping for breath, but refusing to stop. Suddenly, someone grabbed her arm from behind. Softly calling her name, Azrahan ran to catch up with her. His voice carried both concern and worry. His tone abruptly changed. His expression darkened as he asked who had made Laureate cry, then gently wiping away her tears. Laureate leaned her face against his hand, feeling an immense sense of relief and gratefulness that she still had Azrahan by her side. Not wanting to burden him further, she insisted that she hadn't cried. Embracing Azrahan, she concocted a reason for her dash, claiming she couldn't wait any longer to see him, and that she missed him so much. But Azrahan saw right through her lie. He then invited her to go back home. In her jumbled emotions, Azrahan's hug felt like an oasis in the desert, a glimmer of hope for a better life, even though she knew her time in this world was limited. Days later, Azrahan noticed that something was off with Laureate. She didn't seem like her usual self. She even needed to be asked for a hug, whereas she used to run up to Azrahan begging for a daily hug. Lately, she appeared really down. Azrahan felt completely helpless. He wanted nothing more than to spend the whole day with Laureate, but he had an emergency meeting regarding the war that he couldn't skip. Despite being lovers now, Azrahan wished Laureate would share her burdens with him. But what could he do when Laureate herself didn't want to? Sitting by the window, Laureate had a gloomy expression as she clutched a letter in her hand. It was from Madame Charb, who apologized and expressed guilt towards her. Madame Charb explained that Laureate's mother had relentlessly begged her to deliver the letter, promising it would be the last time. In the letter, Duchess Blanche expressed regret for not properly stopping Laureate on that day. She mentioned there were many things she wanted to say to Laureate, and pleaded for her to spare some time to meet. She provided the time and place for their meeting that day. Laureate's anger boiled over, causing her to crush the letter in her hand. She felt a wave of dejection wash over her as she questioned why her mother suddenly acted like she cared, but hadn't shown any concern when Laureate was still with them. The clock showed that it was already 10 minutes past 5. Lariette's mother had been waiting at the restaurant she mentioned in the letter. As Lariette walked into the room, her mother's face lit up with relief that she had finally arrived. The food was already on the table, ready to be eaten as Lariette took her seat. In an attempt to show her care, Duchess Blanche offered Lariette some food to try. However, memories of past events flooded Lariette's mind. She remembered her mother telling her to stop eating in order to maintain a slim body, and the last family dinner when Rayanne refused to eat with her, leading her mother to instruct Lariette to return to her room immediately. But now, her mother seemed so different. Trying to keep a smile on her face in front of Lariette and encouraging her to eat heartily. However, Lariette remained unaffected by her mother's sudden change in behavior. She got straight to the point and asked her mother what she wanted to say, making it clear that she would only listen and then leave quickly. Duchess Blanche was taken aback by Lariette's directness. Lowering her head, Duchess Blanche apologized, expressing regret for not paying enough attention to Lariette and not taking proper care of her. She realized the value of Lariette only after losing her and acknowledged that nobody in the family truly cared about her, instead blaming her for everything related to household matters. With deep remorse, Duchess Blanche admitted that Lariette was the only one who genuinely cared about her, but her own actions had driven Lariette away. Lariette closed her eyes, suppressing her anger, realizing that her mother didn't truly grasp the pain she had caused. However, she stood up abruptly, ready to leave. She made it clear that she had listened to her mother's apology, but that didn't mean she would return to the Blanche family. Duchess Blanche looked helpless, offering her sincere apologies as Lariette headed towards the exit door. However, it turned out to be a trap. Lariette had been lured into this meeting by her mother's invitation and now found herself trapped there. Lariette was completely taken aback as she desperately fought against the people restraining her. With no other option, one of them silenced Lariette with a forceful blow to her back. She crumpled and fell to the ground while her mother sat still, doing nothing. Just then, Duke Blanche emerged, accompanied by his men who swiftly removed Lariette from the scene. Casting a menacing glare at the unconscious Lariette, he turned to Duchess Blanche with an evil grin and declared that a mere apology wasn't the proper way to bring back a missing child. Inside the Blanche residence, Lariette struggled relentlessly to free herself from the handcuffs binding her hands. But no matter how hard she tried, they wouldn't budge even a bit. She couldn't believe her own parents would do such a thing to her, going as far as locking her magic powers too. Feeling utterly helpless, Lariette sank to her knees on the floor and let out a heavy sigh. Weak from not eating since yesterday, she sat near the door, realizing there was little she could do in her current state. Suddenly, a soft whisper reached her ears from outside the room. Recognizing the voice as Anne's, her former maid, a glimmer of hope flickered in Lariette's eyes. Anne stood before the door, asking about Lariette's condition with genuine concern. Lariette reassured Anne that she was okay. Through the closed door, they exchanged updates and asked about each other's well-being. However, Anne then asked if there was anything she could do to help. She informed Lariette that Duke Blanche had gone mad, declaring the previous night that he would not allow Lariette to live in peace. Tears streaming down her face, Anne vowed to seek assistance. But Lariette quickly urged her not to, expressing her fear that harm might befall Anne as well. Feeling remorse for the past, Anne confessed to Lariette that she deeply regretted not being able to help her when she was injured and left the Blanche residence. Now, Anne was determined to lend a hand to ensure she wouldn't have any regrets in the future. Lariette was touched by Anne's words, torn between hope and resignation. Knowing that her time was limited, she yearned to experience happiness and contentment, even if just for a little while. As Anne stood up, she revealed her plan to speak to Joel, the magician teacher in the Blanche house. She assured Lariette that she would obtain the key and return as quickly as possible. Panicking, Lariette desperately tried to stop Anne, fearing for her safety. However, her efforts were in vain. Realizing there was nothing she could do, Lariat slumped against the door, overwhelmed with a sense of helplessness. As Lariat shut her eyes, out of nowhere, the door was slammed open, sending Lariat flying. Duke, Blanche, and Rayan stormed into the room, trying to throw their weight around and show their power over Lariat. Rayan, with his face all bruised up, had a smug grin when he saw Lariat in her sorry state. Lariat couldn't help but wonder what had happened to Rayan's face. But she couldn't deny that the bruises actually made him look kinda good. Duke Blanche marched toward Lariat, blabbering about his brilliant plan to trap her and make her reflect on her mistakes. But looking at Lariat now, he thought she didn't give a damn about regretting anything. Trying to get back on her feet, Lariat called him out on his nonsense, claiming she hadn't done anything wrong. This boldness ticked off Duke Blanche even more. He used his power to slap Lariat hard across the face, knocking her off balance. Lariat trembled, fighting to stay on her feet. Duke Blanche grabbed her shoulder, refusing to give her a moment to catch her breath. The thunder roared, drowning out the sound of Lariat's body hitting the ground amidst the crashing of chains. Duke Blanche exploded with anger, ranting about the money he had spent to raise Lariat properly, only for her to escape to that monster Duke's house. He accused her of disrespecting her father and claimed that she had instigated Duke Kendall to harm Rayan. With a dismissive wave, he declared that Lariat wouldn't leave that room until she realized her mistake. As Duke Blanche stormed out, Rayan, still lingering, wore a wicked grin and approached Lariat. He gloated about her current predicament, blaming her for insulting him. Grabbing Lariat's clothes and yanking her up, Rayan faced her bruised face with satisfaction. But even with her battered appearance, Lariat stared him down with a fierce look. And suddenly, Rayan let out a piercing scream. Lariat fearlessly sank her teeth into Rayan's hand, drawing blood. Caught off guard by Lariat's boldness, Rayan recoiled, feeling a mix of terror and anger, claiming that Lariat had lost her mind. But Lariat didn't back down. She showed no sign of fear and even spat in front of him, leaving Rayan even more shocked. Overwhelmed with fear, Rayan quickly fled from the room. In a panic, he instructed Joel to lock the door, accusing Lariat of being insane due to her association with Duke Kendall. Before locking the door, Joel took a quick glance inside the room, his expression remaining indifferent. Lariat couldn't keep her balance any longer and collapsed onto the ground. Helpless and lying there, memories of Azrahan flooded her mind. She remembered his infectious smile that could instantly brighten her day, the way he showered her with love and cared about every little detail of her life. It made Lariat feel deeply loved by him. Tears streamed down her face as she helplessly longed for Azrahan's presence. Out of nowhere, Anne's voice startled Lariat. It was a voice that brought a spark of hope, causing Lariat to lift her head in anticipation. Anne shared the incredible news that she had found someone who could rescue Lariat. In an instant, Lariat's tears vanished as Anne revealed that none other than Duke Kendall himself was on his way to save her. In a disheveled state, with a pale complexion and an intense gaze, Azrahan, accompanied by his loyal guard Gerard, approached the Blanche residence. He was determined to retrieve Lariat and bring her to safety. Noticing an uninvited guest approaching his residence, Duke Blanche, with Joel trailing behind, appeared visibly upset by the situation. He didn't hesitate to express his displeasure, claiming that Azrahan was audacious for showing up at his house without prior notice. Gerard, observing the scene from behind Azrahan, grew irritated by Duke Blanche's disrespectful attitude. However, Azrahan, maintaining his intimidating gaze, calmly stated his purpose for being there, to retrieve his beloved. Duke Blanche hesitated for a moment, unable to fully comprehend what Azrahan meant, but Azrahan reiterated his intention clearly, emphasizing that he had come to take Lariat back with him. Now face to face, Duke Blanche still failed to recognize the true extent of Azrahan's power. He looked down upon Azrahan, accusing him of stealing his daughter. Sensing the imminent danger, Duke Blanche began to feel a twinge of intimidation in Azrahan's presence. Azrahan clenched his fists and firmly stated that it would be wise to bring Lariat back peacefully, as he was prepared to do whatever it took to reunite with his lover. Meanwhile, Lariat forced herself to get up, even though she was still wobbly. She then asked Anne to confirm if Azrahan was actually present. Anne explained that she had sought Joel's help, and it was Joel who had messaged Duke Candle. Lariat made her way to the nearby window while Anne assured her that Joel had done it discreetly. With her skinny hands still handcuffed, she finally reached the window and caught sight of Azrahan. Her heart filled with hope as she saw him being insulted by her father, knowing he had come to rescue her. Lariat figured out that Azrahan couldn't see her from outside. So, she quickly came up with a plan, grabbed a nearby curtain, yanked it off the rod with all her strength. She rolled the curtain around her hands, making sure they were well covered, and smashed through the window. Wow, the power of hope is truly something. Without hesitation, Lariat stepped out of the window. Not even the broken glass could stop her. Finally, she reached the balcony, the way out of her nightmare. She shouted at the top of her lungs, calling out to Azrahan, who turned his head and was utterly shocked to find Lariat there. Her determination to escape that house was undeniable, and now she was ready to jump off the balcony. As Azrahan saw his beloved flying through the air, he instantly sprang into action to catch her. Meanwhile, Joel snapped his fingers, casting a spell that created a shield, slowing down Lariat's descent. Azrahan spread his arms wide, prepared to catch her. As Lariat fell into Azrahan's arms, she experienced an indescribable happiness. I can't even find the right words to explain it, but I can feel it. I'm so relieved that her nightmare didn't last more than one chapter here. Phew! Azrahan caught Lariat safely, and they both shared the same joy. When Azrahan noticed the bruises on Lariat's face, his expression turned dark, and he demanded to know who had hurt her. Oh no! It looked like Azrahan was on the verge of losing his temper. He then turned his gaze towards Duke Blanche, his eyes filled with a deadly glare. The dark aura emanating from Azrahan terrified both Duke Blanche and even Joel, who was innocent in the situation. While carrying Lariat in his arms, Azrahan declared his intention to kill Duke Blanche. Lariat gently caressed Azrahan's face, trying to calm him down. She pressed her forehead against his and whispered for him to leave with her, assuring him that she wanted to go back to their home. When Azrahan heard this, his eyes lit up with joy. He was thrilled that Lariat now considered Candle's residence as her home too. However, Duke Blanche was taken aback by the affectionate couple in front of him. He tried to intervene and prevent Lariat from being taken away by Azrahan. This annoyed Azrahan, who gave Duke Blanche a fierce glare, silently warning him that if he dared to come any closer, he would be crushed into pieces in no time. Lariat, who was in the most pain, turned her face away from her father. Duke Blanche was shocked by Lariat's current state and couldn't believe he had caused her so much suffering. Are you kidding me? Joel, who was still standing behind Duke Blanche, flashed a gentle smile, indicating his relief that Lariat was now safe. Grateful for his support, Lariat smiled back at Joel. She was truly thankful to have him by her side, as he had always been there for her. She promised herself not to forget his kindness. Finally, Lariat could breathe the fresh air once again, having escaped from her hellish family once more. Azrahan, you forgot to remove the handcuffs from Lariat's hands. Oh well, thanks anyway. Now I can proudly say that Lariat was finally free. Upon reaching the Candle residence, Halstein appeared shocked and immediately called for the priest. Just as we expected from our old man. Azrahan gently laid Lariat on her bed and started examining her. Suddenly, Lariat's cheerful self resurfaced as she called out his name and wrapped her hand around Azrahan's neck. She expressed her gratitude to him for rescuing her. Azrahan couldn't help but wonder why she still wore a smile despite being injured all over. She even thanked him without blaming him for arriving late to save her. Earlier, when Azrahan received the message from Joel, he had been ready to crush the Blanche family for daring to take Lariat away from him. Feeling remorseful, Azrahan hung his head, unable to meet Lariat's gaze. He apologized for arriving late, but instead of responding, Lariat gently tilted his head up. Then, out of the blue, she asked for a kiss, expressing her sincere desire to have it right then and there. Azrahan couldn't refuse her request, as he felt the same longing. Lariat pulled Azrahan's face closer, and they shared a passionate kiss, finally reunited after a day apart. Their kiss deepened, releasing all the pent-up emotions. Suddenly, Lariat flinched, causing Azrahan to worry if he had hurt her lips. But she showed no sign of stopping and demanded even more, declaring that it wasn't enough. "This might just be the longest kiss they've had in the entire video I've made." Azrahan grabbed her waist, pulling Lariat onto his lap, and they continued kissing each other passionately. Okay, now they had to break apart to catch their breath. Lariat's face was a mix of bruises and flushed cheeks, and she seemed out of breath. But Azrahan, despite his concern for her well-being, was consumed by his desire, pleading for more kisses. With his arms still wrapped around Lariat's back, he pulled her even closer, seeking permission to kiss her more. He explained that no matter how much they kissed or for how long, it would never be enough for him. He even entertained the thought of taking things further than just kissing, wanting to make Lariat his and his alone. However, Lariat also seemed caught up in the moment. She expressed her deep love for Azrahan, but then realized that she shouldn't allow herself to fall for him completely. She knew she had limited time left to live, and the thought of parting ways would only cause pain in Azrahan's heart. Despite being aware of this, Lariat couldn't help but get carried away and fall deeply in love with Azrahan. And there they were, continuing their passionate kisses. Azrahan poured out his love for Lariat, confessing that he was deeply and madly in love with her. Just her mere presence brightened his days, and her words had the power to drive him crazy. This was a completely new experience for him, feeling both loved and in love with someone. Their kisses grew even more intense, and well, you can probably guess what might have happened next if they were in that position. Let's just say it's better left unsaid here, but I'm sure you know what I mean, right? Suddenly they stopped kissing, sensing a sense of urgency, particularly from Azrahan. Swiftly, he moved Lariat back to the bed and pinned her down. Unable to express the depth of his feelings through words, Azrahan chose to show it through his actions. Excitement and a hint of fear mixed within Lariat, leaving her speechless. She lay there silent as Azrahan, still on top of her, drew closer, signaling that he was about to take their connection to another level. Lariat's heart was racing like crazy, even though she still had visible bruises on her face. The blush on her cheeks couldn't hide the bruises. Azrahan had her pinned down on the bed, and she wondered if she would be okay with it. Resting his face on Lariat's body, Azrahan admitted he couldn't hold back any longer and felt like he was losing his mind. But then he regained his composure and realized it wasn't the right time, so he had to hold himself back. He was concerned about Lariat's well-being and worried that his curse could make things worse. Azrahan hesitantly lifted his head, but Lariat reassured him that they could have their moment another time. Caught up in the situation, their faces drew closer to each other. Suddenly, Halstein burst into the room, calling out their names. With a beaming expression, he informed them that the priest had arrived. You can probably imagine the couple's reaction to that, right? Doha, with a dark and intense vibe, straight up asked Lariat who had the guts to hurt her like that. He didn't even bother hiding his true expression, unlike his usual self. Lariat hesitated to reveal the truth, while Doha tried to mask his emotions and said that he had warned Lariat about not getting hurt, expressing his disappointment that she didn't listen. He glanced at Lariat's wrist, and she noticed his gaze, explaining that she kept the bracelet he gave her because it was pretty. Doha still felt annoyed about what happened to Lariat and wondered which part of her was hurt. He was in a bad mood, especially seeing her swollen lips. Suddenly, he pulled Lariat's head closer to his and started the healing treatment. While healing her, Doha asked if it was Azrahan who caused the harm. But Laureate quickly clarified that it wasn't Azrahan who hurt her. In fact, Doha was just about to ask if her swollen lips were because of Azrahan. Laureate also revealed that she had been kidnapped. Upon learning the truth, Doha felt sorry for himself that he couldn't protect Laureate as he had promised. The bruises on Laureate had completely healed, and Doha asked if she felt any pain elsewhere. She replied with a no. Sporting a smile, Doha told Laureate to always wear the bracelet, claiming that it aids the healing process. Laureate reluctantly agreed. Doha still examined Laureate closely and gently touched her face, instructing her to stay still as he cast another healing spell on her face. In his head, Doha was thinking that if he gave in to his desires, Laureate would probably end up hating him, and the idea of Laureate having some kind of disdain for him was oddly exciting, but he didn't want to ruin their good relationship. Out of the blue, Laureate flinched, and Doha quickly asked if she was hurt anywhere else, noticing something on her feet. But Laureate assured him that she was fine. Sensing that something still wasn't quite right, Doha gently picked up Laureate's foot. He carefully removed the glass shards stuck on her feet. However, all Laureate could think about was how dirty her feet must be and how she didn't want Doha to touch them. She didn't let on to Doha because she believed he must have been raised to be more refined. But the truth was, Doha had never received any decent treatment from others since he was a child. He had always been a lowly commoner who was constantly mocked and humiliated. The next day, in Azrahan's room, as Azrahan was getting undressed, he asked Laureate if she was feeling completely fine now. Laureate, sitting on Azrahan's bed, replied confidently that she was totally okay and fully healed. Azrahan, avoiding eye contact, expressed his concern that it might drain Laureate's energy. Upon hearing that, Laureate's face turned beet red. But then, shirtless, Azrahan turned towards Laureate and announced that he was ready now, so they could get started right away. Wait, get started with what? Nervously inching closer to Laureate, Azrahan awkwardly knelt on the bed, facing her. Laureate slowly reached out to touch Azrahan's body and began the purification treatment on his upper body. Ah, so it was for purification. Phew, I thought my mind was going in the wrong direction. Finally finishing the treatment, Laureate cheerfully declared that the purification on his upper body was now complete. Seeing the curse gone, Azrahan was still in disbelief. He thanked Laureate for the purification, feeling a mix of emotions and disbelief that he finally had hoped to live a normal life. Laureate gently kissed his cheek and assured Azrahan that even though it was too early to celebrate, she promised to completely remove the curse soon. With a bright smile, Laureate announced that they would move on to the next purification on Azrahan's lower body. But suddenly, they found themselves in an awkward situation. Laureate turned her face away, hiding her shy expression, while wondering how to ask Azrahan to take off his pants for the purification. She quickly came up with an excuse, saying that she needed to take a break after the purification, so they could do that next time. However, feeling embarrassed, Azrahan reluctantly stated that his lower part was fine, and he just wanted to make sure Laureate didn't misunderstand. But his sudden explanation only made things even more awkward, and Azrahan regretted saying anything. To make it even weirder, out of nowhere, Laureate's stomach growled loudly. Azrahan suggested they eat together, adding to the strange situation. In her room, Laureate lay on her bed, her mind filled with thoughts about recent events. She couldn't help but feel grateful that Azrahan saved her when she was kidnapped by her own family. The most important thing was that Joel and Anna had also helped her. She wondered if she could bring them here now, but at the same time, she worried if her time in this world was coming to an end. Laureate regretted being so obedient to her parents all this time, feeling like a fool. If she hadn't known her life was limited, she wouldn't have felt this newfound sense of freedom. As her happiness grew, the thought of dying became less and less appealing. She thought about Azrahan and what she liked about him, his gentle and sweet side that nobody else knew, and how he would express his jealousy. Laureate realized that her feelings for Azrahan were growing deeper. She felt a sense of relief, thinking that Azrahan might not love her as intensely, so he would be okay even if she was no longer around. Feeling a mix of relief and sadness, Laureate let out a heavy sigh. But out of nowhere, a massive thunderclap roared, sending a wave of terror through her. It was as if she could still see her father standing before her, ready to strike whenever the thunder struck. The haunting memories of her past trauma resurfaced, causing her to cover her ears and shut her eyes tight. She screamed at the top of her lungs, trembling with fear. Determined to escape that situation, Lariette mustered up her courage and bolted out of her bedroom, desperately searching for someone to help her. She kept running until suddenly, Azrahan appeared before her, looking confused and concerned about what he witnessed. Lariette, still pale and trembling, couldn't find the words to explain. Shocked, Azrahan asked her what had happened, urging her to come inside his room. Still shaking, Lariette sat down while Azrahan sat beside her. He asked if she wanted a hot tea and assured her that he would prepare it right away. He then inquired if Lariette was feeling sick or something. Trembling, Lariette confessed that she was terrified of the sound of thunder and that she couldn't bear to be alone in this kind of weather. But before she could say more, another deafening thunderclap interrupted her, causing Lariette to instinctively jump into Azrahan's arms. Seeing how scared she was, Azrahan embraced her tightly, trying to soothe her trembling form. Thinking back to his own traumatic experiences during the war, where he had encountered someone desperately in need of help, Azrahan couldn't help but be stunned by the current situation. Comparing it to the past, when he had felt helpless, seeing Lariette trembling and seeking solace in him made him realize that this time he didn't want to let her go. Lariette hesitantly asked if she could sleep with him that night, clarifying that they would only hold hands. Blushing, Azrahan was left speechless, which made Lariette think he didn't want to. She quickly apologized, saying she would sleep on her own if she had asked for too much. However, as Lariette started to move away from Azrahan, suddenly a loud thunderclap startled her, causing her to cover her ears and eyes. But before she could react, Azrahan pulled her into his embrace, his worried expression evident as he looked at Lariette. Meeting his gaze, Lariette reassured him that she was okay now, expressing her gratitude with a smile. As Azrahan gently caressed her hair, he unexpectedly suggested that Lariette should sleep in his room. Resting her head on his comforting hand, Lariette thanked him. Finally, they both lay on Azrahan's bed together. Lariette reassured Azrahan that she wouldn't do anything to scare him, but Azrahan, his body tensed, claimed that he wasn't afraid of her. Hearing his words, Lariette playfully teased him, poking him and pointing out that his scared expression was written all over his face. Azrahan, covering himself with his arms, pleaded with Lariette to stop. However, Lariette didn't give up and continued teasing him by poking him all over. Suddenly, Azrahan grabbed Lariette's wrist, pinning her down on the bed and begged her to stop. With a helpless expression, he explained that he was trying not to do anything to her, which was why he was pleading with her. Just then, a thunderclap boomed, causing Lariette to tremble in shock. Azrahan noticed that despite her fear of the thunder, she was still trying to act fine by teasing him. Slowly, he intertwined his fingers with Lariette's, silently communicating that he wanted her to lean on him and trust him with everything. Shifting his body slightly while still holding hands, he wrapped his arms around Lariette, pulling her closer to him, hoping to ease her worries. In Blanche's residence, Duke Blanche was absolutely livid, throwing everything within reach in a fit of anger. He was furious because despite multiple attempts to call for a priest, none were available to come. Nervously, the servant explained the situation, stating that they had made countless calls but had been met with rejection each time due to the unavailability of priests. Duke Blanche's anger only intensified upon hearing this reason, and he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He recalled Gerard informing him that Lariette had no injuries, and the Duke had considered releasing her to avoid any rumors about his mistreatment of his own daughter. However, Gerard seemed to know exactly what Duke Blanche had been contemplating. At that moment, Rayan happened to be descending the stairs and witnessed his father conversing with Gerard. Memories of his own kidnapping by Azrahan flooded Rayan's mind, along with the accidental fall that had resulted in his broken legs. Now, with the dire situation of his beloved son's injury, he couldn't help but wonder what they should do in the absence of a priest. He started to blame Lariette for not being present when they needed her, as he believed she could have healed Rayan. Unable to bear the weight any longer, Duke Blanche made up his mind to visit the temple immediately. In the Altheon temple, Duke Blanche caused a scene, demanding that the priests there treat his son. He couldn't wrap his head around the fact that there were so many priests present, yet none of them were available to help his son. The situation only fueled Duke Blanche's anger, making him even more furious. Out of nowhere, Doha appeared and inquired about what was going on. The priests immediately bowed down to greet him, which caught Duke Blanche off guard. With a piercing gaze, Doha once again asked for an explanation of the situation. Finally, the moment he had been waiting for had arrived. An opportunity for him to seek revenge for what had happened to Lauriette. Feeling all jittery standing in front of the high priest, Duke Blanche tried not to screw up. He said sorry for causing a scene while Rayon, totally clueless, blamed the lousy management in Altheon. Duke Blanche quickly cut in, explaining that his son needed treatment, but no priest showed up, which is why they just showed up unannounced. Truth is, Doha had forbidden all the priests from helping them. Doha swiftly changed his expression and grinned, admitting that his priest messed up. To make amends, Doha offered to treat Rayon himself. Yeah, those shady eyes tell you exactly what he's planning for Rayon, right? But Duke Blanche acted all thankful, as it was an honor to be treated by the next pope. In his sneaky mind, he saw this as a golden opportunity. Something even Duke Candle couldn't get, and he even thought about using Doha to boost his own name and status. Without wasting any more time, Doha told Rayon to come along. But just before Rayon left, Duke Blanche leaned in and whispered to him, "Hey, you know Doha's gonna be the next pope, right? So be on your best behavior." Off they went to Doha's room. Inside, Rayon couldn't help but snoop around a bit. Out of the blue, Doha asked how Rayon got hurt, and Rayon casually replied that he tripped by accident. Doha got closer and quickly grabbed Rayon's hand to check the scar. It was a bite mark from Lauriette from before. Doha seemed to find it amusing, imagining Lauriette's tiny mouth biting Rayon's hand like that. But Rayon was annoyed, yanked his hand away, and Doha just smiled and said sorry. While casting the magic spell on Rayon, Doha couldn't get that cute bite mark out of his mind. Still, he knew he couldn't let Lauriette's mark stay there. Once the bite mark completely healed, Rayon couldn't resist making a snarky comment about Doha being a commoner. There was this rumor going around that the next pope, Mikhail Doavelian, was the son of a street prostitute. Rayon muttered about the rumor, annoyed that someone like Doha, who came from humble origins, could be part of the Holy Temple. Hearing Rayon look down on him, Doha just smirked and mentioned that Duke Candle seemed to be going soft if he allowed a brainless trash talker like Rayon to be around. Leaning in closer, Doha suggested that maybe some part of Rayon's body needed to be broken to make him act nicely. Naturally, Rayon got ticked off by Doha's words and stupidly launched an attack. But Doha effortlessly dodged, tackled Rayon's foot, and bam! Rayon ended up kissing the floor. "Smooth move, Doha!" As Rayon lay on the floor, he couldn't help but wonder how Doha easily dodged his punch. Doha, seemingly reading Rayon's thoughts, explained that growing up on the streets made it too simple to avoid such a weak attack. Stepping closer to the dizzy Rayon, Doha asked if his head was hurting. Rayon trembled, asking what Doha had done to him. Doha revealed that he had messed with Rayon's mana, and if left untreated, it would explode in a few months. Helpless and still trembling, Rayon groaned in pain. Doha added that unless Rayon's abilities surpassed his own, he would never be healed. And, well, there was no one like that around. So Rayon better be wise from now on. Desperate not to meet an explosive end, Rayon begged for mercy, asking what he should do. Doha extended his hand and declared that if Rayon ever laid a finger on Lauriette again, that day would be his funeral. Meanwhile, in the morning, Lauriette woke up in awe, her mouth watering as she appreciated the magnificent view in front of her. Yep, it was Azrahan who never failed to make our hearts flutter. And that pretty face in the morning was the real deal. Gathering her composure, Lauriette asked if Azrahan had managed to get any sleep last night, as he looked pretty tired now. To be honest, Azrahan couldn't even close his eyes. So yeah, he definitely hadn't slept at all. He turned to Lauriette and asked what she had planned for the day. "Lauriette, casually moving her blanket, mentioned that she planned to see Doha, unintentionally showing her thigh. Yeah, poor Azrahan's face turned all red, and he quickly looked away while trying to respond to Lauriette. But she didn't stop there. Lauriette happily added that after that, she planned to sleep with Azrahan. After that statement, Azrahan paused for a moment, taken aback by her sudden openness. But Lauriette couldn't stop laughing at Azrahan's response when she teased him. She kept teasing him, and Azrahan felt a bit relieved, thinking that if one night could keep him awake, he wouldn't survive the next one. Holding his face, Azrahan stepped out of his room, only to be surprised by Halstein already there, with tears in his eyes. Halstein stammered, saying he always believed that a day like this would come. Azrahan just stood there, saying nothing, only observed Halstein. Halstein even started to imagine Azrahan and Lauriette's wedding day, asking Azrahan about the date and what kind of dress and suit they would need. He kept going on about wedding stuff, but he stopped abruptly as Azrahan covered his mouth with his hand, begging him to stop. Halstein quickly made up a reason that since Azrahan was busy, the wedding should be prepared in advance. However, Azrahan, still tired from not sleeping well, questioned himself in his mind if he deserved marriage. Feeling like he wasn't worthy of getting married, but at the same time, hoping and eagerly waiting for his wedding with Lauriette, Azrahan made a vow in his mind to spend his life only with her forever. Blushing, Azrahan thought it was too early for such thoughts. He quickly clarified that he had no immediate plans to get married. Hearing Azrahan say this, Halstein was taken aback, wondering how come after they had slept together, Azrahan didn't consider marrying Lauriette. Azrahan turned away, explaining that he didn't do anything to be responsible for, and that he was ending the discussion as he needed to leave. Halstein was even more shocked by this revelation. He couldn't understand how they had shared a bed but hadn't taken things further. He wondered if there was something wrong with Azrahan or if he was just too innocent, given that Azrahan's world revolved around war. Plotting something in his head, Halstein thought about how he might be able to help Azrahan. Lauriette finally made it to the Altheon temple without giving Doha a heads up about her visit. She asked one of the priests there if she could meet her friend, a low-ranked priest named Doha. The priest seemed puzzled, so Lauriette described how Doha looked: long silver hair and golden eyes. But as she explained, the priest's expression changed, realizing it matched his boss's description. Just then, Joshua rushed in, saying he knew who Lauriette meant and he invited her to follow him. As she stepped inside the room, Lauriette couldn't help but be amazed by how incredible it looked. She couldn't help but wonder if Altheon had loads of money, considering even a low-ranked priest like Doha had such a nice room. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and Doha entered, looking a bit disheveled, asking if something was wrong with Lauriette since she showed up without any announcement. Behind that surprised look, he had actually changed his clothes in a hurry before. Lauriette said she just wanted to surprise him, and Doha was genuinely surprised indeed. He then asked what brought her there besides the surprise. Hesitantly, Lauriette explained that she needed his help. Doha wondered if she was just like the others who only came to him when they needed help. With excitement written all over her face, Lauriette asked Doha to teach her how to use magic properly. Doha seemed a bit puzzled, saying he was a priest, not a wizard, but Lauriette insisted, saying that Doha was actually really skilled at magic. She then revealed that she was a purification wizard herself, even though Doha already had an inkling about it, despite her not mentioning it before. Lauriette explained that she had a surplus of mana but never had the chance to learn how to use it. Her motivation was to be able to protect herself and stop feeling helpless in tough situations. She made it clear that Doha was the person she trusted the most, and that's why she sought his help. Smirking, Doha agreed to lend a hand. He leaned closer to Lauriette and asked if she could grant his wish in return. Lauriette took a moment to stop and said that granting all wishes sounded like a total scam, leaving Doha completely confused. She then got serious and asked, "What if you asked me to dance and sing in weird clothes on the street?" Doha couldn't help but burst into laughter at Lauriette's unexpected remark. He quickly clarified that he only wanted his wish granted if it wasn't too much, and he trusted Laureate's judgment. He assured her that she could reject it if it was too overwhelming for her, and Laureate immediately agreed to the deal. Excitedly, she reminded him that now that the deal was sealed, they could start the lesson right away. As Doha agreed, Joshua came in and told him that someone had come to see him. Seeing Joshua's expression, Doha wondered if it was the old high priest who had arrived. He then apologized to Laureate for not being able to teach her that day. Laureate felt bad for dropping by unannounced, knowing Doha was busy. However, Doha reassured her that he would visit her soon. As they walked out of that fancy room, Doha thanked Joshua for letting them use it, and Laureate chimed in saying how awesome the room was. While saying her goodbye to Doha, Laureate couldn't help but wonder if Doha's situation wasn't great, considering he had to borrow a room from another priest. That made Laureate decide not to drop by unannounced like that again. As they waved back at Laureate, Doha whispered to Joshua, joking about his not-so-convincing acting skills. Joshua playfully retorted that he wasn't as sneaky as Doha, to which Doha countered that's just a basic skill all Altheon members should have. On their way to meet the high priest, Doha had this feeling that the old high priest, Jibral Pharaoh, was probably out to find some fault in him. He thought maybe it was because the current pope wasn't doing too well, and Jibral Pharaoh was worried that Doha might be the next in line for the position. So he was keeping a close eye on Doha, trying to figure out a way to bring him down. Back at Candle Manor, Laureate suddenly jumped on Azrahan as soon as they met. Azrahan instantly felt refreshed the moment he saw her, even though he had been feeling bored all day before that. He wondered if it was because Laureate, being a purification wizard, could cleanse his heart too. But their moment was interrupted by Halstein, who apologized as he informed them that there was a mistake, and all the blankets were being washed right at that moment. Trying his best to act, Halstein said that the good news was Azrahan's blanket was untouched. Azrahan casually asked why he didn't just buy a new one. But Halstein had a whole bunch of reasons, claiming that he had gone around different shops, but couldn't find any blanket with the same top-notch quality as the one they had. Now sporting his sad face, Halstein said he couldn't give Laureate the lower quality blanket. Laureate quickly responded that she was okay without a blanket, but Azrahan, knowing Halstein's scheme, told him to give his own blanket to Laureate instead. Laureate refused, but Azrahan expressed concern that she might catch a cold. Seeing the situation slip out of his control, Halstein suggested they sleep together again tonight. And surprisingly, Laureate immediately agreed. Azrahan was caught off guard, and as he tried to explain, Laureate interrupted, asking if he didn't want to sleep with her. Blushing and feeling worried, Azrahan couldn't come up with a good reason, but Laureate brushed it off and invited him to grab a meal instead. She assured him that she wouldn't touch him like yesterday, but we all know what happened to poor Azrahan, right? Following Laureate to the dining room, Azrahan thought to himself that he just needed to hold it together, and everything would be okay, that nothing should happen then. In his room, Azrahan was totally freaking out, knowing he'd have another night with Laureate. Then there was a knock on his door, and bam, there she was with that big smile, rocking her sleeping dress. And guess what? She brought cake too. As she placed the plate on the table, Laureate played a guessing game and asked Azrahan to guess what kind of cake she brought. Azrahan was racking his brain so hard but finally nailed it, whipped cream cake. Since he got it right, she asked if he liked whipped cream cake, and with Laureate looking all cute, he couldn't help but say yes. So, he fed her a piece of cake, but oops, some cream ended up on the corner of her lips. Laureate started hunting for a tissue to wipe it off, worried she might say something that would make Azrahan run away again. But hold up, Azrahan surprised her big time. He pulled her face towards his, moving in closer, and said that she once told him he should be the one to wipe it off. Without any second thoughts, Azrahan wiped the cream off Laureate's face with a kiss. Laureate noticed that Azrahan's gaze looked like he was ready to devour her right then and there. So she quickly put a stop to it, telling him she was done eating. But Azrahan pleaded for just a little more, saying he was still hungry, and they continued their passionate kiss. Suddenly, Laureate flinched, and Azrahan, who was on the brink of losing control, pulled his face away slowly. He noticed a worried expression on Laureate's face, so he put on a smile and said he was already full. Feeling nervous, Laureate abruptly stood up and quickly jumped onto the bed, covering her blushing face. Azrahan couldn't believe what he had just done, and he ended up stabbing his own thigh with a fork. Talk about being caught up in the moment! Still feeling embarrassed, Laureate called out to Azrahan and told him that she had to finish purifying him. Azrahan lay on the bed next to her and asked what she planned to do after the purification was done. Laureate admitted she had no clue yet. Then she bid him goodnight, as she wanted to get some sleep. As Azrahan watched Laureate sleeping, he couldn't help but think that she was his, and as long as she stayed by his side, he could handle all those feelings in him, the jealousy, possessiveness, and that desire to have her even more. But out of nowhere, Laureate rolled closer to him, hugging him in her sleep, and it caught Azrahan by surprise. Her body kept pushing against him, making him blush and feel all nervous. He thought about escaping from the situation, but he didn't want to wake her up. You know why, right? As he tried his best to stay calm, Laureate's legs suddenly wrapped around him, putting him in a state where he had no clue how to keep his thoughts straight. Azrahan was giving it his all to hold himself together, but man, he was trembling like crazy. It was like he wanted to scream for help. But nope, not a single sound came out. And the next morning arrived. Laureate woke up all refreshed, while poor Azrahan, for 2 days in a row, he had zero sleep. It wasn't just physically draining, but mentally too. Laureate noticed a note on the table and read Halstein's message, saying that the heavy rain last night had left all the blankets undried, so they should keep sleeping together for a few more days, and that meals would be brought to their room too. Azrahan heard that and felt like he was about to scream for help all over again. On the 4th day of sleeping together, Azrahan finally gave in and couldn't hold it any longer. He crashed out like a dead guy. Laureate watched him, seeing how he slept so peacefully. She couldn't help but admire his face, even in his sleep. He looked stunning as ever. But then, Azrahan seemed to have a nightmare and called out for his mother. He appeared to be out of breath while sleeping. Laureate realized that she had never asked about Azrahan's parents before. All she knew was that they had passed away when he was a kid. She also knew that all the power and money they had was taken away by distant relatives. And after that, Azrahan spent his life in war with his cursed body. Laureate gently caressed his face, wondering how tough his life had been since he was a child, and how he never tried to take back what rightfully belonged to him. All she could do now was purify all the curses he carried, and she made sure to erase them all. She hoped that he could live a life like anyone else, having friends and not worrying about anything. Laureate mumbled that even though she had to go, she hoped Azrahan would be happy forever. But out of the blue, Azrahan grabbed her hand, looking all worried, and asked what she had just said, wanting confirmation if she mentioned leaving him. Laureate tried to play it cool, acting innocent, even though her heart was like, "Ha!" Azrahan kept insisting that he heard her say she was gonna leave. So, Laureate pushed him back onto the bed and assured him that he must have been dreaming or something. Deep down, she didn't want to leave. After all, Azrahan just liked her. It wasn't love, right? So she thought it wouldn't hurt him that bad. Trying to get back to sleep, Azrahan told her to stay with him forever. The next morning, when Azrahan woke up, he had this feeling like he had a nice dream last night, but he couldn't quite remember what it was about. Laureate rested her head on Azrahan's back, saying hi and mentioning that they could start the lower body purification soon. But as soon as the words left their mouths, they both got super embarrassed, realizing they were thinking the same thing. Trying to escape that awkward situation, Laureate suddenly got up, saying they could worry about lower body purification later. She also let Azrahan know she was heading to see Madame Charbet and reminded him about his palace errand. Azrahan seemed a bit bummed, thinking Laureate was right and that he'd be tied up if a war broke out, making it tough to hang out. But then Laureate turned to him, suggesting they do something together afterward. Azrahan got a bit anxious, hoping Laureate's idea wouldn't be too bizarre, and he agreed. Lauriette grinned brightly, feeling overjoyed. She had this list in her mind: go swimming, hit the beach, check out the festival, hit the night market, groove at a dance party, and so on. So, the plan for today was to drop by Madame Charbon's place. As per usual, as Rayhan had Gerard playing the role of undercover bodyguard, talk about the overprotective boyfriend vibes. Now, Gerard might be this super skilled top-tier knight, but even he couldn't figure out how he ended up in some situations that made him question his life choices. But hey, that's Gerard's deal. Let's switch back to Lauriette for now. Madame Charbon was all apologetic, explaining that she couldn't turn down a favor for Duchess Blanche, who wanted her to pass a letter to Lauriette. But being her laid-back self, Lauriette shrugged it off, telling her not to sweat it. To really prove her dedication, Madame Charbon went as far as to declare that she'd actually turned down the whole Blanche crew as customers for her boutique. Except for Lauriette, of course. However, Lauriette knew the Blanche bunch were broke, couldn't afford high-end boutique shopping. Just then, Lauriette spotted a figure lurking in the shadows behind a curtain. She asked Madame Charbon if there was another visitor, sensing she might have walked in at the wrong moment. Lauriette was about to bail, thinking she'd just come back later. But then a voice from behind the curtain piped up, and someone stepped out, blocking her retreat. Coming out of hiding, she gives Lauriette a wave and a hey there. Long time, no see. Rocking that tomboy style effortlessly, this drop-dead gorgeous girl was none other than the princess herself. Lauriette returns the greeting, feeling a tad jittery. The princess's name was Elizabeth, and rumor had it she'd been drop-dead gorgeous since birth and had a special place in the emperor's heart. Thanks to the Blanche family's loyalty, they had a tight bond with the imperial crew, so tight that the emperor had picked Rayhan to be Elizabeth's fiancé. Back in the day, when House Blanche was riding high and before Candle got his power back, they were the top pick among the empire's 3 dukes. But Rayhan, he'd always had this attitude, a real knack for belittling Elizabeth, which of course didn't sit well with her. To make matters worse, he even tried to play the whole women should know their place card on the princess, acting all high and mighty as her future hubby. But guess what? Elizabeth wasn't having any of that nonsense, so she gave Rayhan a taste of his own medicine, quite literally knocking him off his high horse. That little showdown shattered their engagement into a million pieces. Since then, Elizabeth had sworn off any future fiancés. She had a way of scaring them off faster than a cat at bath time. Lauriette hadn't crossed paths with Erzi for about 5 years, mainly because she'd gone out of her way to dodge her. But seeing Erzi again, Lauriette couldn't help but notice how much had changed in her during those 5 years. Erzi, all graceful and gentle, motioned for Lauriette to lift her head. Radiating like a star that could practically blind you, Erzi casually mentioned that she had a hunch Lauriette was tight with Madame Charbon. Trying to shield her eyes from Erzi's blinding brilliance, Lauriette answered that Madame Charbon had lent her a hand a while back. With the realization that she was no longer a Blanche member, Lauriette figured there was no need to steer clear of Erzi because of Rayhan. With a cheerful grin, she asked Erzi to drop the formalities and just call her Lauriette instead of Lady Blanche. Leaning in, Erzi gently ruffled Lauriette's hair, sealing the deal and urging Lauriette to use her first name too. Lauriette was stunned by Erzi's ethereal beauty, and she couldn't help but get a bit drooly over that kind of gorgeousness. Chilling in the carriage, Lauriette was pretty stoked that she'd managed to make some pals, even though she felt like her clock was winding down. She couldn't help but wonder why all the cool stuff seemed to happen right when she was about to clock out, making it super tough to bid them all farewell. She tried to reassure herself that it'd be all right as long as the connections weren't crazy deep. Lost in her thoughts, she dozed off. Out of nowhere, a knock on the carriage door jolted her awake. Doha was there, all like, "Why you still chillin' in the carriage?" Stepping into the enchanting forest, Laureate was totally blown away by the scenery. Doha filled her in that this forest was like a hidden gem. Hardly anyone swung by since it was miles away from the city. But according to Doha, it was the best magic learning territory. He gave Laureate the nudge to start flexing her magical muscles, like she used to. Laureate did her thing, and her magic stirred up the trees, giving them a little dance. Doha seemed kinda skeptical, like he thought Laureate just burned a ton of juice for a minor trick. Then things got interesting. Doha took Laureate's hand and placed it on his chest, telling her to tap into her mana flow to check out his divine power rhythm. After that, he urged her to channel her power in a similar way and give the magic thing another go. But when Laureate tried to unleash her magic, it was still all sorts of wonky, and she worried Doha might catch some of the heat. Without missing a beat, she dove in to shield him. Even then, Doha had a hard time wrapping his head around it. He couldn't believe how Laureate, despite knowing he had way more firepower, would go all in to shield him. While keeping Doha safe under her magical shield, Laureate was totally tripping over her own wizardry. She was so hyped that she pulled Doha into a hug, all stoked about pulling off that spell. But, hello! Their faces were way too close for comfort and they both froze in their tracks. Then Doha played it cool, giving Laureate props and calling out her smarts. Flashing that mischievous grin of his, he was like, "You're not done yet, though." He laid out this whole list of magical tricks Laureate should master. But honestly, Laureate was like a kid at Christmas, bouncing off the walls with excitement. As Laureate made her way back home, she mulled over today's magic lesson. In just a single day, she could sense her grip on her magic getting tighter. Sitting across from her, Doha had his own thoughts. He was kinda blown away that someone with such a magical gift hadn't been properly taught at Blanche. Watching Laureate genuinely enjoy their lesson made Doha's heart do this weird skip-a-beat thing. He started wondering if it was her magical genius that piqued his interest, even though he was typically the type to get bored easily. To break the tension, Doha switched gears and mentioned this festival happening in a nearby little town. There were plans for a night market, a flower parade, and even a masquerade ball. Doha was just about to invite Laureate when she beat him to the punch, eagerly revealing she was all in for a date with Azrahan at the festival. She threw in a thanks for the heads up, leaving Doha absolutely speechless. When the carriage pulled up at Candle's Manor, Laureate was all set to hop out. But just before she did, she turned to Doha and laid down some gratitude vibes. She told him that being his buddy was seriously the bomb, the best gift she could ask for. Little did she know, it was like a dagger to Doha's heart, a reminder that he was squarely in the friend zone. Yeah, poor Doha. He was stuck in that friend zone abyss, and that's exactly why he was feeling all down in the dumps. Tough break, Doha. Inside the manor, Azrahan was already posted up, doing his best impatient act and calling out Laureate for being tardy. But Laureate brushed that off like a champ and dished about the upcoming festival that Doha had spilled the beans on earlier. With a grin that could light up a room, she laid it out for Azrahan, inviting him to be her partner for the event. But dude was all about his body's curse being a buzzkill. Laureate's heart sunk a bit, and she hit him with a legit heart-to-heart. When would they ever get to hit a scene like that? Next thing, she just whipped off Azrahan's shirt, revealing his curse-free chest. With her finger pointing and the million-dollar question, she pushed, now that the upper body curse was history. What was his hang-up? But then she pulled back, making it clear she wasn't trying to bulldoze him into anything. While buttoning up Azrahan's shirt, she pitched this cool idea. How about they hit the festival at night, giving them the perfect excuse to rock masks? One more time, she laid it on the line, asking if he was down for the ride. And oh boy, Azrahan's face turned all shades of crimson, but he nodded. Game for the plan. At the festival, Laureate was having a blast rocking a bunny mask and juggling a big old cotton candy. With a megawatt smile, she threw out the offer to Azrahan, wondering if he was down to snack on some sugary goodness. Azrahan, feeling a tad on edge, managed a shy nod. And just like that, it was date city. Laureate fed her adorable boyfriend cotton candy while they strolled hand in hand. Azrahan was totally going with the flow, following Laureate wherever she led, and agreeing to everything she wished. As they walked along, Azrahan couldn't help but notice people didn't look at him with disgust or fear anymore. It was like a total flip from what he was used to. He shifted his attention back to Laureate and, out of the blue, laid a surprise smooch on her lips. He let her in on the secret. He really wanted to share that cotton candy experience one more time. But, oh, that spontaneous kiss threw Laureate off her game, especially since it was out in the open. She let Azrahan know she wasn't a fan, then kind of bolted, leaving him standing alone in the crowd. Laureate was seriously floored by Azrahan's sudden lover-boy skills. Just when she was about to turn back to him, she caught sight of this random chick swooping in on her boyfriend. The lady was all like, "Hey, you're flying solo? Wanna hang with me?" Azrahan, in that moment, was kind of taken aback. It was his first time experiencing people not gagging at his scent. He was sort of zoning out, still trying to find Laureate, and he managed to decline the lady's offer. But here's the kicker. Laureate saw the whole thing from where she was standing. And then it was like a mini marathon as she bolted, thoughts racing. She was thinking, like, if her time was up, maybe Azrahan was already starting to fall for someone else. And even though she got it, it was just a little hard to swallow that it might have happened so quickly. After huffing and puffing from her sprint, Laureate just stopped in the middle of nowhere, trying to talk herself out of feeling jealous. But then, out of the blue, someone hailed her from behind, this dude with flaming red hair and an alpaca mask on. He seemed concerned, asking if she was feeling sick or something. He insisted she take a seat and handed her a drink he had on hand. To put her mind at ease, he took a sip himself, showing her there was nothing funky in there. With her mask lifted, Laureate gave a heartfelt thanks to the alpaca-masked Samaritan. Seeing her without her mask, the alpaca-masked dude sort of freaked out, his palm practically plastered to his face as he muttered that he might be catching feelings right then and there. Oh boy, another contender for the second male lead slot? Or maybe sliding into third place? Rolling her eyes in annoyance, Laureate made it clear that she had a boyfriend. But this guy? He stayed all calm and collected, stating that the kind of line she just dropped was a classic rejection phrase, like the ultimate proof. Laureate was seriously scratching her head, wondering if this dude was freshly imported from the Wild West or something. Then, just when you thought he'd give it a rest, he decided to go big this time. He hinted that maybe he'd been a bit off before, so now he was going for the full-on dramatics. Dropping down on one knee, he went all poetic, talking about how her beauty had this vice grip on his heart, and he popped the big question, would she go on a date with him? It was like a throwback to some 15 years ago kind of love confession. Laureate was stunned. She couldn't believe someone was still pulling that old-school move. But true to form, she shot him down again, this time with a firmer hand. Out of the blue, this surprise attack came at the alpaca dude from behind, but he totally brushed it off like it was nothing. Yep, the angry boyfriend was on the scene, swooping in like a hero. Azrahan's face had this whole mood switch as he glared, questioning how this alpaca guy had the guts to try and sweep his girl off her feet right under his nose. It was like the dude was asking for a one-way ticket to a world of hurt. The alpaca guy turned his attention to Azrahan, raising an eyebrow and asking Laureate if the dude attacking him was her main squeeze. But Lariette was still in total shock as she witnessed this alpaca dude casually blocking Azrahan's surprise attack like it was a walk in the park. Studying Azrahan with this critical eye, the alpaca guy had the audacity to state that he looked even more dashing and impressive than Azrahan. This time, Lariette's patience was wearing thin, and she couldn't help but get majorly ticked off. In fact, she whipped out her magic, basically giving the alpaca guy a not-so-subtle hint to back off, and sheathed that sword he was waving around in front of her boyfriend. Azrahan was totally caught off guard by Lariette swooping in to defend him. But the alpaca guy was all like, "My bad. I didn't realize you were dead serious back there." He sheathed his sword and sort of shrugged it off, saying he thought Lariette was just bluffing, which is why he decided to pour out his heart. Lariette had had enough, though. She stepped right between Azrahan and the alpaca dude and was like, "Look, rejection means rejection." She even wagged her finger at him, calling him out for being a cocky alpaca. Despite the alpaca guy's regret, he still let slip that he was kind of falling for Lariette. But alas, he admitted it just wasn't in the cards for him. With that, he turned on his heels and bounced, leaving Lariette standing there, still in her total guard mode. Wrapping his arms around Lariette from behind, Azrahan let his worries out, admitting he was kind of freaked out that she'd ditched him earlier. And the whole alpaca guy love confession? It got him thinking, what if Lariette actually said yes to that dude? The thought was like a nightmare he didn't want to have. Lariette gave his hair a soothing stroke and apologized, explaining she got lost while wandering around on her own. Then, her expression brightened up as she thanked Azrahan for hunting her down. It took Azrahan by surprise, and he asked her straight up if she'd really been holding out for him. Lariette's answer was crystal clear. Yeah. She turned to Azrahan, wrapping her arms around him, and gave a heartfelt apology for the whole mess that went down. The music cranked up a notch, almost beckoning them to jump into the party vibes. Lariette threw it out there, inviting Azrahan to hit the dance floor with her. But there was the whole mask debacle. They'd lost theirs. Lariette was all about being considerate, wondering if maybe they should just bail. But Azrahan? He didn't even hesitate, just blurted out that he was totally cool with dancing maskless. Seeing how sure he was, Lariette wanted to be sure she wasn't dragging him into anything. She double-checked, asking if he was really, truly, no strings attached okay with it. And that's when Azrahan turned on the charm, giving her this soft, reassuring look as he told her he was okay. After all, being with her was all he needed. And so, there they were, back in the thick of the crowd. Lariette was all smiles, practically beaming from ear to ear as she grabbed Azrahan's hand and playfully yanked him towards the dance floor. Azrahan was on cloud 9, feeling like he'd just stepped into a whole new universe. This was uncharted territory for him. He'd never even dreamt about something like this. With his cursed body smelling like death warmed over, he'd been used to nothing but looks of disgust. But Lariette? She was like a one-way ticket to a fresh start, introducing him to a life he never thought he could have. She basically handed him a new lease on being human, pulling him out of that dark pit he'd been trapped in all his life. Before Lariette, the idea of dancing and having fun in a crowd was as far-fetched as it could get. Sure, Azrahan was a bit stiff on the dance floor, but he could tell that Lariette looked at him with such tenderness. How could he not fall head over heels for her? Their eyes locked, and in that moment Lariette spilled her heart out, confessing her love for him. Azrahan was ready to do the same, but then the boom of fireworks drowned his words. Caught up in the whirlwind of the moment, they were on the brink of sealing it all with a kiss. But out of the blue, Lariette used her hand to block Azrahan's lips, and without any hesitation, Azrahan playfully kissed her hand. Oh, those enchanting eyes of his! He fearlessly sent her a smoldering gaze. Consequently, Lauriette's face turned as red as a tomato. She then turned away in a flustered manner, while Azrahan, assuming Lauriette wasn't pleased, felt a pang of sadness. Noticing Azrahan's gaze falling to the ground, Lauriette reassured him that her reaction didn't mean she disliked it. However, Azrahan seized this moment to ask for Lauriette's permission to kiss her on the lips. Now, Lauriette wasn't one to back down. After all, Azrahan had become quite adept at teasing her. With a seductive expression, teasingly asked if he was interested in spending the night with her. This unexpected proposal hit Azrahan like a ton of bricks, leaving him completely stunned. With a triumphant smile, Lauriette quipped that if Azrahan wanted a kiss, he should have come prepared. Before Azrahan could even formulate a response, Lauriette playfully reiterated that he was being punished. He had earned the privilege of kissing her for a while. Poor Azrahan, who was just about to embark on this new romantic chapter, suddenly found himself back at square one. The following day, as he was getting ready to head out, Azrahan casually brought up if Lauriette was planning to stick to her old habits. Lauriette, playing it cool, responded with a raised eyebrow, wondering what specific habit he was referring to. Blushing all over his face, Azrahan awkwardly tried to explain that she used to compliment him a lot and give him plenty of kisses before he left. Lauriette, maintaining her composure, calmly stated that she wouldn't be going back to those ways, reminding him once again about the punishment he had earned. Undeterred, he stepped closer, pleading if she could at least grant him a kiss. Leaning in just as their lips were about to meet, Lauriette pushed him away, teasingly cautioning him not to rely on his handsome face to win her over. With a bit of a disappointed stride, Azrahan walked off, unable to secure his daily kiss. Meanwhile, Lauriette sported a mischievous grin, thoroughly enjoying the sight of Azrahan practically begging for a kiss. This amusement led her to decide to prolong his punishment for a few more days. As for Azrahan, he discovered that he couldn't even last a single day. A few hours later, Lauriette found herself in another magic lesson with Doha. Doha picked up on her cheerful expression and asked if she was in a good mood. Lauriette, without much tact, attributed her happiness to Doha's suggestion about the festival the previous night. Feeling a bit downcast by her response, Doha swiftly shifted the conversation and dove into the lesson. All of a sudden, Lauriette's memory jogged back to the alpaca guy from last night, and she shared the bizarre encounter with Doha. That peculiar alpaca enthusiast who had attempted to confess his feelings to her. Doha was caught off guard, seeking clarification on what kind of confession she was talking about. With a hint of embarrassment, Lauriette spilled the alpaca guy had professed that he had fallen head over heels for her. Trying to lighten the mood, Lauriette struck a playful pose and quipped that maybe it was because of her undeniable cuteness. However, Doha's reaction remained utterly poker-faced, leaving Lauriette wondering if her attempt at humor had fallen flat, and somehow grossed him out. In reality, Doha was seething inside, annoyed at the thought of another guy vying for Lauriette's attention. He mustered a forced smile, acknowledging Lauriette's beauty, but beneath the surface, a surge of anger churned within him. Now it was time for the lesson. Doha glanced around and asked Lauriette if she wanted to turn that forest into a mess like she did yesterday. Lauriette felt a twinge of regret about the previous incident, and Doha reassured her that the magic lesson was sufficient for now. The upcoming lesson was focused on combat. Lauriette's enthusiasm soared as she looked forward to this new lesson, eagerly querying Doha about what was in store. Doha outlined that she needed to start from the basics. Suddenly, Lauriette's eyes widened in shock as Doha mentioned that the fundamental skill to learn was to kill. In a rather unexpected move, Doha placed Lauriette's hand on his chest and instructed her to kill him right there. At first, Lauriette thought Doha was playing around, but his serious tone indicated otherwise. Frustration and confusion welled up within her and she pushed Doha away, urging him to stop. Trembling with disbelief, she couldn't fathom how Doha was trivializing the value of a life, especially given her own limited time in this world, a life she deeply wished to preserve. Doha attempted to explain the rationale behind the lesson, but Laureate seemed to have already grasped the essence. Drawing from his own experiences, Doha shared with Laureate that the harsh reality of living on the streets wasn't as rosy as it might seem, and survival often favored the strong. Locking eyes with Laureate, Doha delivered a sobering truth. If they didn't possess the mindset to eliminate threats, they would likely find themselves on the receiving end of danger. So, Doha basically told her to toughen up or risk getting taken down. Back then, Laureate had a reality check and started plotting her escape without anyone catching on. She didn't want to end up dead or kidnapped by her family again, so she decided to pick up some self-defense skills. Whenever she had to leave, it was like she was teetering on the edge of disaster, so she couldn't spill it to anyone. She also mulled over how the world had never been kind to her, so if she wanted to stay safe, she had to be ready to throw a punch if needed. Looking back, Laureate actually felt grateful to Doha for the advice. Doha was thinking that even though he could always watch Laureate's back when things got dicey, he really didn't want her to be in those tight spots alone. He worried if his words might come off as harsh, but he genuinely didn't want anything terrible happening to Laureate. He had to be straight up because, let's face it, Laureate couldn't hide her noble status even if she wore the scruffiest clothes. Doha recognized Laureate's potential, but she lacked combat experience. So all he could do was cross his fingers and hope Laureate got where he was coming from. Then Doha was like, "Come at me one more time, but this time give it everything you've got, like you're out to take me down." But Laureate just shook her head, clearly not on board with the plan. Doha tried to persuade her by dropping the bomb that he was way stronger than she thought. He even brought up the idea that if he got hurt, he trusted she'd patch him up in a jiffy. But Laureate wasn't having it, telling him that even if she could heal him, he'd still feel the pain. In that moment, Doha got hit with this weird feeling in his chest, like something was tickling his heart. It was super uncomfortable and he couldn't even put it into words. So, Doha got himself together and told Laureate to give it a shot. He had his weapon ready now, which was this fancy folding fan. He swung it at her, trying to land a hit, but it seemed like Laureate couldn't quite dodge it, even though she made a real effort to escape. Doha then asked her if her magic was just for show, which made Laureate remember she had some magic tricks up her sleeve. She decided to try a spell that wouldn't harm Doha and shot a stream of water at him. But Doha was quick on the draw, blocked her magical water attack, and turned it right back on her, leaving her all soaked. And so, they kept at it until they were both exhausted. Back at Candle's Manor, Halstein welcomed Laureate, who had just rolled in late, and asked if anything had gone down since she was tardy. Laureate, looking like she'd been through the ringer, told Halstein she was just a bit wiped out and inquired if Azrahan had made it home yet. Halstein spilled that Azrahan was hitting up the bathroom, and he offered to give Azrahan the heads up that she was back. Laureate waved it off, saying it wasn't necessary. She thought to herself that today she needed to purify Azrahan's lower half. But then the big question hit her: how to get hands-on without it being too weird. Then, like a lightning bolt of inspiration, she dashed off, brainstorming that maybe when Azrahan was in a bathrobe, she could do the purification and touch his skin directly. Meanwhile, after wrapping up his bath, Azrahan was still rocking his bathrobe, wondering when Laureate's punishment would finally be over. But then, out of nowhere, Laureate showed up right in front of him, totally catching him off guard. Azrahan quickly tightened his bathrobe, stuttering in complete shock. Without missing a beat, Laureate stepped in closer, and Azrahan's face turned as red as a tomato. He blurted out that she was way too close for comfort, but Laureate, without saying a word, shoved Azrahan onto the bed. She then moved even closer, asking if they could get started with the whole lower body purification thing right now. Without waiting for Azrahan to respond, she went right for his leg, saying she'd begin around the knee and thigh area. Azrahan couldn't help but squirm, trying to dodge Laureate's touch. He distanced himself from Laureate and protested that this couldn't be happening. Absolutely not. But Laureate just calmly asked him if he thought it was weird instead. Then, she said it was necessary and told Azrahan to think it through. So, Laureate kicked off the purification process, and man, that curse seemed really awful. Luckily, those lessons from Doa came in clutch, making her magic way more effective. After wrapping up the purification, Laureate beamed at Azrahan, announcing that it was a done deal. But out of the blue, she got quite a shock when she noticed Azrahan was just there, not saying a word, looking like he was about to burst. Well, Laureate, you might have just awakened the beast, I guess. Now that things were getting a bit weird, Azrahan took the opportunity to move closer to Laureate. But Laureate quickly turned her head and said, "No kissing allowed." He reached out and gently pulled Laureate's face toward him, paying no mind to what she had said earlier. Azrahan leaned in and kissed Laureate on the lips. All of a sudden, Azrahan swiftly laid Laureate down on the bed. Azrahan slowly pressed his body against Laureate, while kissing her gently. Laureate couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed. Still holding her down, Azrahan gazed deeply into Laureate's eyes, recalling her earlier statement about kissing needing determination. He emphasized that it wouldn't be an issue if he was fully prepared. In this moment, Laureate stopped dodging and welcomed every kiss Azrahan planted on her. The thought crossed her mind that this would be their first night together. Out of the blue, she reached out and put her hand around Azrahan's neck, signaling that she was ready to take the next step in their relationship. Azrahan was taken aback at first, but then felt relieved, knowing that Laureate felt the same way he did. Seeing Laureate looking all seductive on the bed, Azrahan couldn't help but compliment her beauty as he casually loosened his bathrobe. But then, the nagging thought of his uncured curse crept in, and he started worrying whether Laureate would be put off by his condition. He began to contemplate putting a stop to things until his purification was complete. But Laureate could sense the worry on Azrahan's face. She reached out and gently touched his face, running her hands over it, reassuring him that he was incredibly handsome, and there wasn't a single part of his body that wasn't beautiful. Then she sealed her words with a tender kiss on his lips. This made Azrahan believe that if Laureate said it, it must be true, and he no longer saw his cursed body as something repulsive. As he held her close, he silently declared in his mind that Laureate was his savior and his everything. At that moment, he started to feel like Laureate belonged to him alone. Out of the blue, Laureate laid back on the bed and pulled Azrahan closer to her, catching him by surprise. She encouraged him to proceed and do as he pleased. And that's when the special moment of their night together finally unfolded, after all the twists and turns they'd been through. The following morning, the sound of chirping birds roused them from their slumber. However, Laureate appeared completely drained after her steamy night with Azrahan, and she couldn't resist letting out a few choice words about him. On the other hand, Azrahan was feeling completely refreshed with a radiant expression on his face, and he playfully asked Laureate if she was feeling worn out. No longer feeling bashful, Azrahan just came out and asked Laureate if they could go for another round. But Laureate couldn't hold back and shouted at the top of her lungs that she might just die and labeling Azrahan a pervert. This time, Azrahan didn't throw in the towel. He pleaded just one more time with Laureate. Laureate, who had a soft spot for handsome faces, couldn't resist falling for it once more. She then pulled Azrahan closer and struck a deal that it would be just this one last time. And so, they relived that night once more. During tea time at Count Osman's manor, Erzi, looking stunning as ever, was already there and warmly greeted Laureate as she arrived. Laureate bowed and expressed her gratitude for Erzi's tea party invitation. Erzi, noticing Laureate's formality, kindly reminded her to speak casually, to which Laureate hesitantly agreed. Erzi then gently patted Laureate's head and complimented her for being a good girl, her beauty leaving Laureate quite smitten. As they strolled together, Erzi mentioned that her friends liked to hang out there and that she wanted to introduce them to Laureate. Erzi assured Laureate that her friends were all kind and hoped they would like her and not be bothered by her joining the tea party. Erzi, being sweet, stated that nobody would dislike Laureate because she was such a charming lady. So they made their way to the garden where the ladies were already waiting. These ladies included Genevieve Charbet, or Madame Charbet, Juana Osman, Count Osman's eldest daughter, and Soraya Merchant, the lady who appeared innocent but probably wasn't. Laureate and Urzi took their seats and began chatting with the ladies. During the introductions, Soraya suddenly looked puzzled and asked Laureate if she had no last name, implying that she must be a commoner. She wondered how Laureate had managed to become close to Urzi. This question naturally left everyone in an awkward situation, except for Soraya, of course. Juana Osman and Urzi wasted no time in responding, telling Soraya to mind her manners and that her question was quite rude. Soraya, with her innocent expression, claimed she was relatively new to the social scene and apologized for her impolite question. Laureate tried to be understanding and assured Soraya that it was okay, wondering if Soraya didn't mean any harm by it. They continued their conversation and tea time together, sharing stories and laughter. As it was time to bid farewell, Juana approached Laureate and whispered that she didn't like talking behind someone's back. But she felt the need to inform Laureate that Soraya had only joined their group a few weeks ago. She explained that Urzi had taken pity on Soraya because she seemed to be in trouble during her debut, so Urzi had brought her into their circle. Juana also suggested to Laureate that it might be a good idea to keep her distance from Soraya, given that Soraya seemed a bit insensitive. Stepping back a little, Juana told Laureate that she could make her own judgment. Nevertheless, Laureate still thought that Soraya didn't seem like a bad person. Juana added that she mentioned it because she didn't want Laureate to have any trouble with Soraya. Suddenly, a voice called out Laureate's name from behind, and when she turned around, she was taken by surprise. Azrahan, with his incredibly handsome face, approached, saying he had come to pick her up because he missed her so much. Azrahan couldn't care less about their surroundings as he poured his heart out to Laureate. This display naturally left all the ladies completely stunned. Then, Azrahan swiftly shifted back to his usual cool demeanor and greeted Urzi. With a grin, he cheerfully escorted Laureate to the carriage, prompting her to bid farewell to her friends. However, Urzi couldn't help but wonder what had caused Azrahan's sudden change in behavior. Inside the carriage, Laureate asked Azrahan if he planned to head back to the Imperial Palace after picking her up. Azrahan's face clouded over as he confessed he wished they could hang out longer. Laureate tried to ease his worries, saying she had her own stuff to do, so it was bound to happen. Azrahan eventually got it, but he seemed a bit awkward, and his flushed face sort of gave away his desire to hold Laureate's hand. Laureate couldn't help but think he was absolutely cute. Laureate suddenly grabbed Azrahan's face and planted a kiss on his lips. Azrahan attempted to dodge at first, asking her to wait a moment. But then he softly put his arm around Laureate's waist and returned the kiss tenderly. Their kisses grew more passionate and intense, as if they had no intention of pulling away from each other. But when their lips finally parted, Azrahan casually remarked that even though he had no prior plans, it didn't seem like a bad idea inside the carriage. He then softly squeezed Laureate's hand and gave her a loving look. Laureate couldn't quite grasp what Azrahan meant and started to feel puzzled, so she asked him to explain. Instead of answering, Azrahan leaned in for another soft kiss on Laureate's lips and playfully remarked on her boldness, noting that she had initiated the kiss without the intention of finishing it. Azrahan smirked and said that meant Laureate needed a little punishment too. Laureate found herself falling for his handsome face over and over again, making it hard for her to think straight. She even briefly wished she could convince Azrahan to skip the Imperial Palace. Her mind kept urging her to carry on with what they were doing, hinting that the carriage idea wasn't so bad after all. But just as Azrahan leaned in closer to her, the coachman suddenly shouted, announcing their arrival at their destination. Laureate seized the opportunity, quickly jumping out of the carriage with a blush on her face, leaving Azrahan behind. As she dashed away, Azrahan couldn't help but laugh. He called out to Laureate, wearing his seductive smile, and suggested they could continue later at home. Laureate turned back to Azrahan and said that if he kept that up, they should use their own room. In the midst of the city, Laureate spotted Doha, who really stood out from the crowd. She called out to him, captivated by how amazing Doha looked in his casual outfit. Doha explained that he had to change because his uniform got stained earlier. As Laureate examined Doha in his casual attire once more, she couldn't help but admire his good looks. His face was like a fashion statement itself, and it was mind-blowing. Doha brought her back to reality, explaining that he wanted to teach her how to blend in and stay low-key, which was why he suggested meeting there. Laureate was pumped, wondering if being discreet was a crucial skill for self-preservation. She eagerly mentioned that she liked it. But when Doha heard the word like from Laureate, out of the blue, he felt something strange inside his heart, like it was racing, and it made his face turn red. But then it dawned on him that Laureate didn't say she had feelings for him, and he couldn't help but wonder what was going on with him. While he was lost in thought, Laureate asked about the first steps. Regaining his composure, Doha explained that her objective was to vanish into the crowd so no one would notice her. He went on to provide a detailed explanation of how to manipulate mana. As Laureate attempted to concentrate on casting a spell, she unexpectedly reached out and grabbed Doha's hand while working her magic. She flashed a smile and asked if that's what Doha meant. This left Doha momentarily speechless. A few hours ago, Doha had been ambushed by a group of assailants. He quickly unleashed his magic to defend himself, and in the end, he managed to defeat all of his attackers. However, his priest's robe was now stained with blood. Knowing that Laureate was someone who wouldn't harm others out of fear of hurting them, he figured his bloodied appearance might frighten her and decided to change into a fresh outfit before meeting her. It was a decision he never thought he'd make for a woman. Doha admitted that ever since he first met Laureate, he'd been experiencing all sorts of new feelings. He questioned whether his interest in her was deepening. Doha used to be someone who detested the idea of falling in love the most. He never thought he'd find himself in this situation. But here he was, unable to deny that he wanted Laureate deeply. Seeing Laureate made him realize just how much he desired her. He wondered if she had any inkling about his true identity. As Doha was the high priest in Altheon and a strong candidate to become the next pope, he pondered whether Laureate would be drawn to his power and status, which equaled that of the emperor. However, he had a hunch that if she ever discovered his past, she might come to loathe him. She could despise him once she learned that he was once a commoner who had lived on the streets. Out of the blue, Doha caught sight of something behind him, breaking his train of thought. It was the assassin sent to eliminate him. He quickly flashed a smile at Laureate, mentioning that there was something he wanted to purchase and requesting her permission to leave. He assured her he'd be back soon. Laureate, still buzzing with excitement, encouraged Doha to go and assured him she could practice on her own. As Doha scanned the area, he realized he didn't need to worry about leaving Laureate alone since she was surrounded by highly skilled knights in their hidden location. So, he left Laureate behind and disappeared into the bustling crowd. He lured the assassin into a dim, cramped alleyway. The assassin attempted to provoke him, but Doha remained unfazed. As the assassin launched an attack on Doha, he contemplated how to neutralize the threat without getting messy. Just as the assassin's knife was about to reach Doha's head, Laureate sprinted to his side and called out his name. Sporting a deeply concerned expression, she unleashed an attack spell on the assassin without hesitation, ultimately ending his life. Doha was completely taken aback, struggling to believe what he had just witnessed. With the assassin's blood splattered on parts of her dress and face, Laureate wore a concerned expression and asked Doha if he was okay. She hurried over to him, gently touching his face and inquiring if he had been hurt anywhere. Doha couldn't help but wonder why Laureate, a noblewoman who had always avoided harming others and even seemed scared to do so, had now taken a life to protect him. Still unable to find his voice, Doha watched as Laureate, trembling, continued to inquire about his well-being. His heart raced, and he softly called her name. It finally dawned on him that the persistent feeling inside him was love. And yes, he was falling in love with Laureate. Trembling, Laureate hugged Doha, trying to assure him that everything was all right. Doha still couldn't believe his own feelings, attempting to convince himself it was just an illusion. Reminding himself that love was a nasty emotion, Doha used his magic to clean their blood-stained clothes, insisting he was perfectly fine. He expressed gratitude to Lauriette for rescuing him and suggested she head home soon, promising to continue their lesson next time. As Doha escorted her back to the carriage, he convinced Lauriette that the guy earlier was an assassin sent to off him. He stressed that the assassin deserved what he got, and that the most important thing was Lauriette saving him. Doha made it clear that was the only thing Lauriette needed to keep in mind. With a gentle touch to Doha's face, Lauriette thanked him and urged him to be careful. Lauriette's gentle touch on Doha's face made his cheeks turn red and his heart raced. It felt like he was on the verge of spilling everything to her. Despite that, Doha held back and told Lauriette to go. As he saw the carriage moving away, Doha thought it was better for Lauriette to leave quickly. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to keep his feelings in check much longer. Returning to Candle's manor, Azrahan was already there, greeting Lauriette with his charming smile. Wanting to avoid making Azrahan anxious, Lauriette tried to respond cheerfully. However, Azrahan noticed something was off and asked if someone had tried to harm her. Lauriette looked concerned, attempting to deny it, saying everything was fine. Quickly shifting back to her cheerful self, she changed the topic. While walking, Azrahan caught a glance from Gerard, who signaled that something was up with Lauriette. Azrahan figured it was okay if she didn't want to spill the beans, but he wasn't about to just sit back and do nothing. Inside the manor, Halstein had already whipped up a cake to celebrate Lauriette's 50 days in the Candle residence. It hit Lauriette that her time was also running out. Worried that her body might give in to the disease she was grappling with, especially in front of Azrahan, she didn't want him to witness her departure in that state. Despite feeling really down, Lauriette tried to hide her true emotions and put on a happy smile for Azrahan. Yet she couldn't shake the thought that she'd have to leave him soon. In her room, Lauriette couldn't catch a wink of sleep. She thought about all the moments with Azrahan, starting from the first time they crossed paths. It reminded her that she had almost lifted all his curses and helped him overcome his trauma. Knowing that her time was running out, and with so much still left on her to-do list, she tried to reassure herself that she could tough it out for a bit longer, and everything would work out in the end. The next day, Lauriette and her friends were having tea when Geneviève brought back souvenirs from her trip to the east. She handed out ribbons, each with a different color chosen by Geneviève. However, Sharia, being a bit cunning, sported a sad look and eyed Lauriette's ribbon, claiming she preferred the pink one. Lauriette, familiar with such situations from her childhood when Rayon used to snatch her stuff, decided to let Sharia swap ribbons. While the other ladies looked displeased and tried to remind Sharia, Lauriette insisted that they'd just exchange and left it at that. Out of nowhere, Sharia threw in a question about Lauriette and Azrahan's relationship. Lauriette couldn't spill about it being a contract thing, so she just shot her a smile. Geneviève and Urs got all hyped up, saying they'd never seen Azrahan smile the way he did at Lauriette. But then Sharia dropped a bomb, asking if there were any marriage plans in the works. Lauriette played it smart, saying she couldn't spill on that one either. All of a sudden, Sharia's expression changed and she muttered as expected. In the training room, Azrahan and Gerard were going at it, and Azrahan was on fire, not giving Gerard a chance to catch his breath. After hearing about Lauriette taking down the assassin to save Doha, Azrahan told Gerard to dig up everything about Doha. Out of the blue, Gerard brought up the meeting Azrahan attended and asked him if he'd be up for going to war. Things got complicated with the neighboring kingdom, and Candle, being the closest dukedom to the Danube kingdom, was being pushed into joining the war. But Azrahan shut that idea down, saying he wasn't going to war. With Lauriette by his side, he had no plans to leave her behind. Mid-conversation, Lauriette's arrival caught their attention. Azrahan shot a signal to Gerard to make a quick exit. Lauriette strolled in with a big smile, greeting Azrahan, who looked all sweaty. Without missing a beat, Lauriette offered to help Azrahan freshen up, throwing in a playful suggestion that they could take a bath together, making Azrahan's face turn as red as a beet. Surprisingly, he agreed and fired back with a tease of his own. It looked like our shy Azrahan was nowhere to be found. In the bathroom, Azrahan, all soaked in the tub, looked disappointed to find out he was the only one taking a dip. Lauriette was there, though, helping him out with the soap. Suddenly, Azrahan decided to make a bold move and grabbed Lauriette's hand, which already had the soap, guiding it down his body. This move turned Lauriette's face tomato red. Azrahan then pulled her in closer and whispered if they should just take a bath together. Lauriette, not budging, said she was only there to help him wash and teased Azrahan to hang on for a bit, even though it was a bit challenging. Instead, she decided to playfully drench him with water from the wash basin, leaving him all wet from head to toe. Seeing this, Lauriette let out a playful laugh, but Azrahan, with a serious look, called out for her to come closer. Since Lauriette didn't react, Azrahan hopped out of the tub, all unclothed and soaking wet, causing Lauriette to sprint away to dodge him. However, she couldn't escape Azrahan's clutches. As he carried Lauriette, he playfully teased her that it was payback time. Lauriette was ready to get soaked in the tub, but to her surprise, Azrahan didn't head in that direction. Instead, he took her to the bed, gently placing her down and telling her to see if she could handle him. You can probably guess what went down next. The next morning, Lauriette woke up looking all disheveled from the previous night with Azrahan the beast. Halstein let her know that they still couldn't get in touch with Doha, leaving Lauriette concerned and starting to worry about him. But then Halstein asked her about her plans for the day, making Lauriette think about her bucket list. The only thing she hadn't checked off was number 5, traveling abroad. So Lauriette told Halstein she was just going to head to the city. Lauriette wandered around the city, getting everything ready for her plan to leave. She felt confident that she could handle herself against thieves, thanks to her magic skills. Little did she know, Jared had already taken care of that matter. Once she gathered all she needed, she spotted Urs in the bustling crowd. As she approached her, she overheard some guys talking trash about Urs. Unable to tolerate it, Lauriette invited them to a more secluded spot. With a wave of her magic, Lauriette taught them a lesson. Turns out, Urze had been trailing Lauriette and witnessed her dealing with those jerks. Flustered by what Lauriette did for her, Urze invited Lauriette to grab some snacks. Little did they know, Doha and his sidekick were watching them from a distance. Mistaking Lauriette for hanging out with another guy, Doha was burning up with jealousy. He felt the urge to throttle Urze right then and there, not wanting anyone to love Lauriette but him. Earlier, at the temple, Doha had a meeting with High Priest Jabral Pharaoh, who asked Doha why he wanted to meet. Instead of answering, Doha threw the question back, wondering why Jabral Pharaoh wanted to see him. Lately, Jabral Pharaoh had been showing his displeasure toward Doha, seeing him as a rival. Doha realized that Jabral Pharaoh even sent assassins to take him out. Out of nowhere, Jabral Pharaoh brought up the topic of Doha having a lover on the side. This caught Doha off guard, as he didn't want anyone to know about it, fearing something bad might happen to his precious Lauriette. Though Doha remained calm, he warned Jabral Pharaoh not to push him any further. However, Jabral Pharaoh mentioned Doha's mother, pushing Doha to the point where he couldn't hold back his anger any longer. Doha was hit with a blast from the past, remembering his childhood nightmare when his mother used to tell him she loved him and couldn't live without him. He was on the edge of attacking Jabral Pharaoh, when, just in the nick of time, Doha's subordinates stepped in to stop them from throwing down. Jabral Pharaoh left, leaving Doha still raging. Suddenly, Doha's subordinate informed him that Kendall had called the temple, indicating that Lauriette was searching for him. He also let Doha know that he did as Doha requested, telling them they had no clue where he was. Doha felt a twinge of guilt as he came to terms with his feelings for Lauriette. He didn't want Jabral Pharaoh to have even the slightest inkling about it. Doha was dead set on avoiding anything that might harm Lauriette, which is why he was determined not to mess up in any way. He then instructed his subordinate to get the carriage ready as he intended to head out. But now, what he witnessed before him hit Doha hard. Lauriette was enjoying herself with another guy. Jealousy stabbed at Doha's heart, prompting him to tell his subordinate to give a heads-up to Kendall that he planned to drop by the next day. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Urze and Lauriette were having lunch when Urze brought up a rumor about Rayon having a terminal illness. The grapevine suggested that Rayon's face was messed up, keeping him confined to his home. Some tales even hinted at an accident. Urze spilled that others speculated it was linked to Mana disease. She mentioned that Duke and Duchess Blanche were all torn up about it. When Urs dropped the name Locadura, the same disease Lauriette had dealt with, it shook Lauriette to her core. She started to wonder if it was a genetic thing. Suddenly feeling queasy, Lauriette got upset, thinking about how she and her brother faced the same illness, yet their parents treated them differently, and that just pissed her off. Seeing Lauriette's pale face, Urs got worried and asked if she was all right. Lauriette assured her that she was okay. She thought about not wanting anyone to know about her illness and figured the best move was to go far away on her own. The next day at the Candle Manor, Doha finally dropped by to treat Lauriette, who looked concerned and asked if he had caught the person behind the assassin. Doha avoided eye contact and assured her that everything was under control, so she didn't need to worry anymore. Lauriette, with a big smile, told Doha to keep her in the loop because she was concerned about him. Cutting her off mid-sentence, Doha asked about their relationship. Without missing a beat, Lauriette casually stated they were just friends. Doha realized he had blurted out the question without thinking earlier. Doha gently touched Lauriette's hand while performing the healing procedure. He noticed his heart racing like crazy at the touch, wondering if Lauriette would bolt if she knew how he felt. Out of the blue, Halstein startled Doha from behind, delivering a letter for Lauriette. It seemed Halstein sensed something off with Doha, giving him suspicious stares. As Lauriette read the letter aloud from Urs, Doha's ears perked up. Urs mentioned Lauriette as a soulmate, making Doha ponder if Urs was the guy he saw her with in the city. Jealousy burned inside Doha. Doha couldn't help but let his jealousy show in front of Lauriette, asking her to focus only on him when they were together. His actions made Lauriette wonder if Doha felt neglected. Suddenly realizing he was acting out of line, Doha apologized for being too much. However, Lauriette reassured him that she understood his feelings, especially since she kept talking about her other friend. Somehow, Lauriette picked up on something strange in Doha's expression. She quickly shifted back to her cheerful self and invited Doha to start their lesson. While teaching Lauriette magic, Doha noticed one of Azrahan's knights sneaking off somewhere. Doha wondered what he was up to, but as long as he didn't pose a threat to Lauriette, he didn't care. In the Empire Palace, the high-ranking nobles were debating whether to go to war or not. But Azrahan had no desire to return to the battlefield and risk his life again. As he strolled around the palace, Azrahan pondered his simple desire to live happily with the one he loved. He couldn't wrap his head around why everyone was so concerned and unwilling to let him live in peace. Out of the blue, Sharia tapped Azrahan on the back from behind and greeted him cheerfully, using his name. Hearing someone other than Lauriette calling him by his name, Azrahan didn't seem too pleased. He quickly retorted that she didn't have permission to address him that way. Panicked, Sharia apologized, explaining she was just following Lauriette's lead. She then asked Azrahan to call her by her name, Sharia. In that moment, Azrahan couldn't help but wonder if he could find a way to get rid of Sharia. Despite being Lauriette's friend, he found her chatter annoying. Sharia mentioned being Lauriette's best friend and how they often met up. She then brought up her belief that it wasn't a good idea to judge people solely based on their status. Hearing this, Azrahan couldn't help but wonder if Sharia was hinting at a relationship between a nobleman and a lady of lower rank. He knew Lauriette didn't think that way. As he thought about Lauriette, he felt a sudden blush and found himself missing her. Seeing Azrahan's expression, Sharia got ahead of herself, thinking that Azrahan was into her. She believed that some nobles were just nice to those of lower rank, and she prided herself on being kind to Lauriette, whom she viewed as a poor commoner. Out of the blue, Sharia invited Azrahan to grab a bite together sometime to get to know each other better. Returning to his usual cold demeanor, Azrahan responded with a casual sure if Lauriette wants to. He then swiftly made his exit from Sharia, his mind filled with thoughts of Lauriette, wishing he could kiss her 100 times over. Meanwhile, Sharia wore a sly smile, pondering if she could get Azrahan to break up with Lauriette and choose her instead. In your dreams, lady. Back at Candle's Manor, Lauriette's magic skills were improving rapidly. Now she could flawlessly use invisible magic. She was thrilled, pondering if she might be the best at it. However, when she entered her room, she found a man already inside, using his invisible skills. He looked surprised as Laureate noticed him and questioned what he was doing there. Panicking, the man introduced himself as one of Candle's knights, but Laureate didn't buy it. He then explained that since he was new there, he had gotten lost. However, Laureate couldn't believe it, asking why he had used the invisible magic. The man struggled to come up with an excuse and quickly asked for permission to leave before darting out of there. Sensing something fishy, Laureate informed Halstein about the suspicious man. Halstein was taken aback upon hearing this. Later that night, Azrahan dashed over to Laureate, looking worried. He hugged her, realizing how reckless he had been to let an intruder into Candle's manor. Recognizing that he had many enemies, he had almost forgotten about Laureate's safety. Azrahan apologized to Laureate, feeling guilty and regretful for his recklessness. Laureate reassured him that she was fine and nothing had happened. Then, out of the blue, she kissed Azrahan, telling him not to worry anymore. After Laureate left, Azrahan turned to Melissa and Gerard, who were hiding nearby. With a sharp glare in his eyes, Azrahan demanded an explanation from them. Gerard explained that the intruder had vanished after being caught by Laureate, and he had no clue about the intruder's intentions in Candle's manor. Azrahan then instructed them to find out, and he gave them a week to apprehend the intruder and bring them to him. After that incident, the atmosphere in the manor became tense, with Azrahan even pleading with Laureate not to go anywhere. On a sunny day later, during a gathering with Laureate's friends, Sharia boldly asked to sit next to Azrahan. The other ladies tried to dissuade Sharia, but she persisted, insisting that her request wasn't a big deal. Laureate calmly responded, saying it wasn't too much. But she simply didn't want to accommodate Sharia's request. Upon hearing Laureate's rejection, Sharia became annoyed and demanded to know why Laureate responded that way. Laureate put on a smile and said it was because Azrahan was so shy. Sharia couldn't hide her annoyance, feeling insulted that Laureate, whom she viewed as a lowly commoner, dared to reject her. In Sharia's mind, Laureate was only there because Urzi pitied her, and she believed it was a waste for someone as perfect as Azrahan to be with a lowly commoner like Laureate. She even tried to signal Urzi to help her, but Laureate could easily read what was on Sharia's mind. Not wanting to cause a scene, Laureate asked for permission to leave first, saying she wasn't feeling well. Seeing Laureate leave the meeting, Urzi quickly dashed after her. Sharia, with a sly smile, suggested that Urz must be chasing after Laureate to scold her. Juana couldn't believe her ears, speechless at Sharia's assumption. Erze called out to Laureate, who looked surprised to see her rushing over. Without wasting any time, Urz apologized to Laureate, saying she couldn't stop Sharia from hurting her. Hearing this, Laureate told her not to blame herself, as it wasn't her fault. Erze reassured her that she would personally talk to Sharia about the incident, expressing her sadness at seeing her own best friend hurt. Erze hoped that Laureate would feel comfortable opening up to her about her feelings. Those words eased Laureate's mind, and she thanked Urza as she embraced her. Doha, who was already present, used his stealth magic to watch them with jealousy, still convinced that Urze was a man. He wondered if Laureate would be as happy to see him as she was to see Urze and Azrahan. As Urze passed by Doha, he realized something that surprised him. Suddenly, Laureate asked Doha why he had arrived early. Doha was taken aback, asking how Laureate knew he was there since he was using stealth magic. Laureate answered with a proud smile, and Doha realized that Urz wasn't a man but the crown princess. Laureate then invited Doha to study at a dessert shop she had just learned about from a friend. Accepting Laureate's invitation, Doha's feelings for her grew even deeper. He couldn't deny his feelings anymore, no matter how hard he tried. He truly wanted Laureate to be by his side. Laureate was in Azrahan's room to perform the final purification treatment. Azrahan couldn't believe that the curse could finally be lifted. Laureate assured him that all he needed to do now was to be happy. Feeling relieved and overjoyed, Azrahan grabbed Laureate's face and surprised her with a kiss on the lips. He didn't plan to release her lips, pulling her onto his bed. He didn't even let her catch her breath until he noticed Laureate was almost fainting from lack of air. Suddenly, Laureate asked Azrahan if, after the purification was complete, they could go somewhere together. Maybe to the sea or anywhere, as long as she was with him. Azrahan, who had never considered it before, felt incredibly happy at the idea of traveling with Laureate for the first time. He eagerly expressed his excitement and said he couldn't wait. Laureate was thrilled with Azrahan's response and suggested they go before summer. Azrahan replied with a confident sure and planted a kiss on her cheek. Meanwhile, Gerard was on the verge of giving up as he couldn't find the intruder, fearing Azrahan's punishment. Finally, Melissa made a breakthrough. She discovered some documents that the intruder had touched, and through magic, she revealed that the intruder had made copies of them. These documents contained information about trade data with the Danube Kingdom, the very kingdom they were on the brink of war with. It seemed Duke Ellington was behind it, trying to manipulate Azrahan into joining the war. Azrahan also noticed traces of Blanche magic on the documents, which upset him. He asked Melissa about the implications of the discovery. Melissa predicted that Duke Ellington would use the documents to accuse Candle of treason, insisting that Azrahan join the war to prove Candle's innocence. Azrahan grew even more worried, his mind consumed with concerns for Laureate. He wondered if he could rectify the situation and if Laureate would wait for him. He then instructed Gerard and Melissa to prepare all the necessary rebuttal documents. During her magic lesson, Doha suddenly brought up Laureate's plan to travel alone, leaving her wondering if she had mentioned it to him before. As they took a break, Doha asked why she wanted to go alone, or if it was too difficult to share. He speculated whether Laureate planned to travel solo after breaking up with Azrahan. To his surprise, Laureate nodded in agreement, indicating he was correct. Laureate then opened up to Doha about her 3-month contract relationship with Azrahan. Doha was surprised by this revelation, and Laureate shared that she was the one who proposed the arrangement. Understanding Azrahan's character, Doha realized that he probably wouldn't be satisfied with just a contract, especially considering how Laureate had helped him find purpose and lifted his curse. Laureate emphasized the need for secrecy to avoid rumors. As Doha agreed, he couldn't help but wonder if he would ever be able to express his true feelings to Laureate. In the Blanche residence, Duke Blanche was in conversation with someone, discussing Laureate's association with Azrahan. The individual he was speaking with turned out to be the intruder apprehended by Laureate at Candle's Manor. Duke Blanche expressed his adamant refusal to allow Laureate to be with Azrahan. He acknowledged Laureate as the strongest descendant of the Blanche family, and admitted to purposely mistreating her to instill cowardice. Blaming Laureate for Rayon's situation, Duke Blanche harbored intense hatred towards her. He ordered the man to eliminate Laureate before she could further disrupt their plans. Laureate dropped by Genevieve's boutique, looking a bit drained, which immediately caught Genevieve's attention. Laureate couldn't help but feel tired after her magic session with Doha. She mentioned she came to buy accessories for Azrahan, as his brooch, given by her, had been accidentally broken by him. Genevieve eagerly showcased her latest product, a necklace adorned with a beautiful stone. The stone's color reminded Laureate of Azrahan's striking eyes. With the funds she received from Doha for healing him, Laureate decided to purchase the necklace, hoping it would evoke memories of her in Azrahan's mind. As Laureate stepped out of the boutique, someone crashed into her, grabbing her bag in the process. Stunned by the sudden theft, Laureate immediately gave chase, but she found herself drained from her earlier magic training and couldn't muster the energy to run fast enough. Fortunately, from the alley where the thief had disappeared, Gerard emerged holding the gift box that Laureate had intended for Azrahan. Laureate expressed her gratitude to Gerard and inquired about his presence there. Gerard explained that he was on his day off and decided to take a leisurely stroll. As Laureate rode back home in her carriage, she couldn't shake off the thought of whether Gerard had followed her intentionally or if it was just a coincidence. She pondered whether Azrahan had instructed him to keep an eye on her or simply to ensure her safety. Determined to clarify the situation with Azrahan once she arrived home. Meanwhile, in a corner of the Candle residence, Azrahan was reprimanding one of his knights for being the spy responsible for leaking trade documents to the Danube Kingdom. He stressed that he wouldn't tolerate dishonesty. Suddenly, the knight lunged for a sword and attempted to attack Azrahan without hesitation. Cool and collected, Azrahan swiftly dealt with the attacker, bringing the confrontation to an end in no time. He then turned to Melissa, who was tasked with handling the body, and inquired about Gerard's whereabouts. Melissa speculated that Gerard must have arrived home shortly after Lauriette, given his duty to protect her. Melissa then questioned why Lauriette was learning magic from a priest, especially stealth techniques. However, with Halstein repeatedly referencing Lauriette's status as the future Duchess of Candle, Melissa resolved to keep a close watch on her. When they left the room, Azrahan sensed something off near the wall. He kept staring at it but didn't say a word. Melissa asked if there was something on the wall, but Azrahan brushed it off and continued walking, telling Melissa that she must have been mistaken. Turns out Lauriette was using her stealth magic there and was shocked to realize she was almost caught by Azrahan. She had intended to ask Azrahan in person about Gerard, but instead overheard Azrahan punishing someone nearby. Though Lauriette was pretty sure that Azrahan had ordered Gerard to guard her, she couldn't understand why she kept trembling. She remembered that their contract relationship was almost over, so why would Azrahan instruct his knight to continue guarding her? Lauriette wondered if she had missed something. In the dining room, Lauriette was lost in her thoughts, so she was startled when Azrahan called out to her. Azrahan then shared about the tension between the Empire and the Danube Kingdom. Lauriette's expression suddenly darkened. Azrahan, looking gloomy, disclosed that he had been ordered to join the war. Upon hearing this, Lauriette felt a surge of anger, unable to believe that they would task Azrahan with war duties when he was supposed to be resting. She was convinced that the tense situation was due to the Emperor's actions, but the blame was unfairly placed on Azrahan. Observing Lauriette's reaction, Azrahan chuckled. He mentioned how it was the first time she had openly expressed her worries to him, which brought him immense happiness. In her thoughts, Lauriette couldn't shake off her concern about Azrahan leaving before her, and feared for his safety. She also questioned whether Azrahan could refuse to join the war. Tenderly caressing Lauriette's cheek, Azrahan reassured her that it was just a minor conflict, nothing like the wars of the past. Reflecting on his past, Azrahan recalled how he once had no hope of surviving, even wishing for death in battle, yet he had persevered. Now, he had a reason to keep living Lauriette. She was his everything. Holding Lauriette close, Azrahan declared that wherever she was, there would always be a place for him to call home. On a bright and sunny day, Lauriette and her friends gathered for tea. Sharia, however, was reluctantly forced to apologize to Lauriette for their earlier altercation. Lauriette accepted the apology, though she could tell Sharia's heart wasn't truly in it. It was obvious that Urza had put her up to it. Sensing the tension, Genevieve swiftly changed the subject, diverting everyone's attention. The other ladies eagerly joined in the new conversation, completely ignoring Sharia. Frustrated by their indifference, Sharia simmered with annoyance, realizing that her anger wasn't registering with them. "Hey, the world doesn't revolve around you, lady." Suddenly, a servant entered and informed Lauriette that Azrahan had arrived to pick her up. Lauriette asked for permission to leave first. Unexpectedly, Sharia abruptly stood and announced she needed to step out for a moment, then swiftly left, leaving the others stunned. Wana voiced her frustration about Sharia's behavior to Urz, expressing her reluctance to associate with her. Erze felt a pang of guilt, realizing it wasn't easy to exclude a noble from a group unless they'd made a significant mistake. Putting on a smile, Urz assured the others she would address the issue with Sharia, and then apologized to everyone. She then turned to Lauriette and offered to escort her. Outside, Azrahan patiently waited for Lauriette, and as he heard footsteps approaching, he turned his head. To his surprise, it was Sharia who was coming towards him, cheerfully greeting Azrahan. Without hesitation, Sharia made a bold move, confessing that she had missed him. Azrahan looked perplexed by her sudden declaration. But Sharia was confident in her charm, believing she could make any man fall in love with her. She even boldly asked Azrahan if he had missed her too. Sharia confided in him that she wanted to meet Azrahan and had asked Lauriette to help her. With a sad expression, Sharia claimed that Laureate refused to assist her. She then reached out and touched Azrahan's hand while expressing her concern about Laureate and Azrahan's relationship, mentioning that a commoner shouldn't be involved with him romantically. Not stopping there, Sharia also expressed her hope that Laureate and Azrahan wouldn't marry. Holding Azrahan's hand, Sharia stated that she didn't want to betray her friend by pursuing Azrahan unless they broke up. She believed that Azrahan would choose her over Laureate. Azrahan quickly responded, pulling his hand away and dismissing Sharia's words as nonsense. He expressed his confusion at Sharia's treatment of Laureate, especially considering Laureate's status as the only daughter of the Duke. Sharia was visibly taken aback by this revelation, realizing that Laureate must be the daughter of Duke Blanche. Azrahan continued, emphasizing that even if Laureate were a commoner, he would always choose to be with her, regardless of Sharia's opinion. With a stern tone, Azrahan warned Sharia that if she continued with her foolish talk, he would not hesitate to take action. Sharia's face turned pale as she fell to the ground, confronted by Azrahan's menacing presence, warning her never to utter his name again. Trembling, Sharia labeled Azrahan a monster. With a chilling calmness, Azrahan acknowledged her accusation. However, Urze intervened, urgently urging Azrahan to cease any further action. Rushing to the scene, Urz apologized profusely on behalf of Sharia. Sharia couldn't comprehend why a crown princess would bow to Azrahan. Azrahan directed Urze to escort Sharia away. However, Azrahan was startled by Laureate's shocked expression as she witnessed the unfolding confrontation. Laureate was feeling a jumble of emotions. On one hand, she was angry at Sharia's nonsensical actions, but she was also shocked to hear the revelation that Azrahan had made. She overheard Azrahan telling Sharia that he wouldn't break up with her, which made her anxious about their contract. She pondered over how to end things with Azrahan. Initially, she thought Azrahan understood their arrangement, but now it seemed like she was playing with his emotions. Worries crept in, fearing Azrahan might get angry and accuse her of deceit. Meanwhile, in the temple, Doha was digging around for information on the connection between Jabral Pharaoh and his mother. Their recent argument had sparked Doha's curiosity, as Jabral Pharaoh had mentioned Doha's mother. However, his search yielded no useful results. Doha began contemplating whether it was worth visiting his mother, but memories of her selling him off to the temple flooded his mind, igniting a wave of anger within him. Later on, Laureate paid Doha a visit without her guard. After explaining her situation to Doha, she seemed quite concerned. Doha quickly reassured her, letting her know that she could count on him if anything happened and that he would be there to help her. Following her meeting with Doha, Laureate decided to take a walk alone, feeling somewhat unwell and tired. Suddenly, she sensed someone approaching from behind. It turned out to be the assassin sent by Duke Blanche, Laureate's father, with the intention to abduct her. In a split-second decision, Laureate unleashed her magic to fend off the assassin. Despite knowing she was outmatched, she persisted, using every ounce of her strength to defend herself and neutralize the threat. The assassin, ensnared by Laureate's magic, became intrigued by her resilience. Just before he could break free, Laureate dashed to find cover, hoping to evade his pursuit. As the assassin broke free from her magic, he searched diligently for Laureate's hiding spot. Concealed behind some crates, Laureate held her breath, praying he wouldn't discover her. Unfortunately, he spotted her easily. Awakening in captivity with her hands cuffed, Laureate struggled to comprehend why this was happening to her. She racked her brain for any mistake she might have made, yearning only for a peaceful existence in her remaining time. Suddenly, the assassin opened the prison door. Fuming with anger, Laureate demanded to know who sent him, questioning if it was Duke Blanche's doing. Drawing closer, he confirmed her suspicions with a sinister grin. He then made inappropriate advances, suggesting they live together and start a family. Enraged, Laureate swiftly incapacitated him with a blow to the head, seizing the opportunity to grab the key. Just as she was about to make her escape, the assassin began to stir. He then yanked Laureate's hair, causing her to tumble to the ground and stabbed her in the leg, rendering her unable to flee. Despite the agony, Lariat couldn't shake the desire to see Azrahan. Meanwhile, at the Candle residence, Azrahan grew concerned about Lariat's recent odd behavior. Suddenly, Gerard burst in, breathless, and delivered the alarming news that Lariat was nowhere to be found. Azrahan was taken aback by the revelation. Azrahan stormed into the Blanche residence, determined to confront them, but Duke Blanche feigned ignorance about Lariat's whereabouts, pretending he had no idea where she was. Azrahan's knights, scouring the manor, found no trace of Lariat. Duke Blanche demanded an apology from Azrahan for causing chaos, but Azrahan shrugged off his hand and issued a stern warning. This left Duke Blanche anxious, fearing that his plot to eliminate Lariat might have been exposed. After leaving the Blanche residence, Azrahan and his knights continued their search for Lariat. Frustrated, Azrahan wondered if Lariat had left on her own because she no longer liked him, but he was determined not to let her go. Finally, Gerard discovered Lariat's trail in the city. Seeing this, Azrahan's worried expression shifted slightly, finding a glimmer of hope in the situation. In the prison, Lariat felt helpless, her mind racing with thoughts of using her remaining mana to blast her way out, but she knew she was depleted. She desperately wanted to survive, especially to finish Azrahan's purification and ensure his happiness. Suddenly, they heard chaos erupting nearby, and the assassin dragged Lariat away, visibly irritated and wondering how Azrahan had found them. Seeing the assassin's frustration, Lariat couldn't help but smirk. Realizing that Lariat had exhausted her mana to get there, the assassin flew into a rage, grabbing her by the neck. Finally, Azrahan, covered in blood, arrived at their location. Lariat was stunned to see him again, and as he approached, he called out her name. Seeing Lariat's leg bleeding, Azrahan was overcome with shock and worry. The assassin, holding Lariat in his arms, taunted Azrahan without fear. Azrahan's anger flared, his hand gripping his sword tightly as he demanded the release of Lariat. However, the assassin, undeterred, threatened to stab Lariat's heart if Azrahan didn't comply. He also ordered Azrahan to dismiss his knights. Azrahan then instructed Gerard and the others to step back, though they did so with hesitation. Now Azrahan found himself alone, surrounded by the assassin's guards. Lariat couldn't help but worry intensely, tears streaming down her face as she pleaded with Azrahan to leave and save himself. Despite his hands being tied, Azrahan defiantly warned the assassin that if he dared to harm Lariat, there would be consequences. The assassin, however, cruelly reminded Azrahan that he should be worrying about himself instead, finding his current helpless state thrilling. Lariat continued pleading with Azrahan to leave, admitting that she was the one to blame for everything. She realized that her actions had led to this situation. Growing desperate, she shouted for Azrahan to go. Meanwhile, the assassin persisted, suggesting that Azrahan's hand be cut off. Lariat felt a surge of worry, questioning why Azrahan wasn't taking any action. She wondered if he was willing to sacrifice himself out of concern for her safety. Feeling the urgency of the situation, Lariat reached out for the assassin's knife nearby. Confusion swirled within her as she watched Azrahan risking his life for her. And in that moment, she recognized her feelings. She had fallen in love with him. Without hesitation, she seized the knife and plunged it into herself, apologizing to Azrahan as she did. With a heavy heart, she tumbled off the cliff, aware of her limited time, hoping that Azrahan wouldn't be angry with her. Azrahan, his face drained of color and eyes wide with shock, leaped forward, tearing through the rope, binding his hands to catch Lariat as she fell. In her mind, Lariat acknowledged the truth she had been denying. She was in love with Azrahan. However, she also knew that her time was limited, which was why she had been pushing her feelings aside. She hoped that Azrahan would eventually stop loving her too, as she understood that their love story would inevitably end like this. Tears streaming down his face, Azrahan held Lariat tightly in his arms, his mind racing as he searched for a way to keep her safe. In his profound sadness, he even questioned whether he deserved any of this to happen. Azrahan's knights swiftly re-entered the scene, confronting the assassin, while Azrahan himself found himself surrounded by the assassin's guards. Despite his grief, his eyes burned with a deadly intensity, conveying both anger and sorrow. It was clear he would make those responsible pay for what had happened to his beloved Laureate, his one and only.